This meeting is called to order. We have an opening of the meeting with a moment of silent meditation or prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Pizzo, do we have any changes on the agenda this evening?
Yes, we do, Mr. Polari. Item number 6 on this evening's agenda, which is the final land development plan for La Azteca at Street Road and Castle Drive. We received an email from the attorney representing the applicant asking that the matter be removed from this evening's agenda due to some conflict on their part, and asking that it be rescheduled to the council meeting in September, and granting the township an extension of time under the MPC for hearing that application.
Does it matter whether it's the first or second meeting?
I don't believe it does, but, oh, I'm sorry, yes. They had given us September 13th.
Okay.
14th. Oh, no.
Okay, do we have a motion to continue?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Polari, that we table item number 6 till the council meeting set forth as of September 13th.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and second. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Anything else, Mr. Pizzo?
Based on the size of the crowd in the room, council for application agenda items 11, 12, if you wish to ask at this time to have your items tabled and heard at the next meeting, speak now. But no, beyond that, that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, number 2 on the agenda, public comments on any agenda items. You'll be able to speak when we also have the hearings on the items also. Seeing no one come forward. Number 3 on the agenda is approval of council minutes for meeting July 26, 2021. Any additions or corrections?
I have a couple minor editorials I discussed with Deb, and I can just send her those via email. That way we don't have to go through line by line, if everyone's okay with that. And they're very minor editorials. Nothing of substance.
Okay, that's fine. Anybody else have any changes?
I have one change also, minor in nature also. I thought I had written it down, but I have, let me see. Give me a second here. Sorry about that. It is on page 11. I think the second line should say just a security bond as opposed to surety. Minor in nature. Security bond.
No, it was a
No?
surety bond.
Surety.
Yes.
It is correct. All right, then
Yep.
that stands as presented then.
Okay, any other additions or corrections?
I'll make a motion that we approve with minor editorial corrections the meeting minutes from July 26.
Do we have a
And I'll
on the
second
motion?
that.
So we have a second on the motion. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes.
Yep,
You're abstaining?
Yeah.
as well as myself due to my absence last meeting.
Okay, so it's 3-0-2. Number 4 on the agenda, consideration and approval to amend the CDBG substantial amendment to the FV 2019 Annual Action Plan for the CARES Act Funds Plan. You hand on that, Mr. President?
Certainly. Earlier this year, council, as you may recall, you approved a usage plan for the township's COVID CV3 fundings which are funds that the township received through the CARES Act. These are community development block grant funds and are to be used specifically for CDBG purposes. The plan that you approved earlier in the year left $66,073 of those funds unallocated. And that was done so anticipating the substantial amendment that's being presented to you this evening. The substantial amendment would have the township's portion of the CDBG funds in the amount of $66,073 allocated for use to provide legal services to assist income-eligible households with issues related to housing and economic instability due to COVID-19. Specifically, what the township would be doing, and this would be in concert with Bristol Township and with the county, who are the three administrators of CDBG funds within the county, that these funds would be used to assist folks as the rental moratoriums and eviction moratoriums begin to be lifted out of the COVID-19 crisis, to provide legal aid and legal assistance to those property owners, homeowners, or renters who might be affected by the end of those moratoriums. So again, these are community development funds that are intended specifically for this kind of a use, particularly as it relates to housing. So this would be an appropriate use of those funds. And again, this is something that's being done in concert with the county and with the Bristol Township. And again, we are the three administrators of community development funds within the county. So if council is of a mind, the administration is asking for you to approve this substantial amendment. It has been publicly advertised previously. The township's intentions in this regard have been available for public inspection and review during the month of July. All of the requirements of the community development program have been met, and so the administration is asking for your approval of this substantial amendment at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Pizzo. Do we have any questions from the board members?
Mr. Pizzo, Mr. Mayor, I know that the county had reallocated some of the COVID relief funding to assist with the flooding events from July. I know that we had briefly discussed the possibility, I'm not sure, whatever came of that.
Well, two things. The COVID funds that we're discussing this evening are not the COVID funds that came by way of the U.S. Department of Treasury under the ARPA Act, the American Rescue Plan Act. These are funds that are through the CARES Act that are, again, specifically for community development purposes. So these funds wouldn't be eligible for that.
Okay.
Secondly, as the mayor may want to speak to in greater detail, the township continues to work with the county as well as with Congressman Fitzpatrick's office to find ways for us to use our ARPA money for assisting individuals, be they homeowners or renters, with mitigation, with repair and replacement of damaged properties and damaged goods coming out of the July 12th storm, as well as the tornado that followed 2 weeks later.
Okay.
Do I have to embellish? Is that okay?
No, that's perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? If not, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion that we accept, approve the CDBG substantial amendment to the 2019 Annual Action Plan for CARES Act plans, fund plans as presented.
I'll second it.
Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Number 5 on the agenda, consideration of public hearing on an ordinance approving the request of Two Bar Dudes LLC to transfer a liquor license number R19579 into the township. Anybody here for that?
So as the applicant's approaching the podium, Mr. Polari, so that the public is aware of what's happening, the township has received an application for an intermunicipal transfer of a liquor license. This is provided for under the state liquor code and allows the township and requires the township to have a hearing such as this one when a liquor license from outside the municipality is intended to be transferred into the township. In this case, as you'll hear, the location that used to be
Brady's.
Brady's Pub on Galloway Road. After it closed following the restrictions from the pandemic, among the steps that the property owner took were to sell the liquor license. There's now an applicant who intends to open a new establishment there that would require a liquor license. The liquor license for Brady's having been sold, it now requires a new liquor license to be brought in for that site. This hearing has been properly advertised in the Bucks County Courier-Times, and the ordinance is in a form acceptable for your consideration this evening, should you choose to do so after testimony from the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Max Rokowski. I represent Two Bar Dudes LLC. The member of that LLC is Mr. Kevin Beard, who's next to me. The first thing I'd like to do is submit a certification of service of notice.
Thank you. See if you can get a little closer to the mic so we can hear you. Thank you.
And I would like to have Mr. Beard give a synopsis of what he intends to do as far as his bar and restaurant and also his background.
Certainly. We'll have him sworn by the court reporter, please.
Yes. Yes. Just want to say, first, thank you very much for taking us right now. My name is Kevin Beard. I've been a resident of Bensalem for over 20 years. My kids actually go to the Bensalem High School, and I used to own the Domino's Pizza on 2175 Galloway Road, plus multiple other units here in Bucks County and down at the shore. An opportunity came. I'm sorry, it's pretty low, so.
I can offer a suggestion that the handheld mic, perhaps you.
Oh, perfect. Is this one? Hello? Hello?
Yep.
Okay, it's better. Like I said before, my name is Kevin Beard, and I've been a resident of Bensalem for about 20 years. Used to own the Domino's Pizza, 2175 Galloway Road, plus a couple other ones in Newtown and Ambler and Levittown. An opportunity came, Brady's actually shut down, and Dawn is a very good friend of mine, and I saw the opportunity to be able to open up a bar, open up Brady's again. The name of my bar is Slim's Irish Pub. It's actually, it's going to stay an Irish pub. My wife is Irish. Her dad passed away 60 years ago. I mean, he's 60 years old and passed away, and so I got an opportunity to name the bar after him. We're going to keep it just like it was before. We're not going to do too much different things in there. It's just going to be an Irish pub. Hopefully a staple inside the community, and I think it'll be a great opportunity for myself. We'll maintain the bar. It'll be very respectful. Won't be rowdy bar or anything like that. And Dawn is actually going to work with me for the first 3 months to make sure everything is working correctly. So that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Just one.
Yes.
Where did the Two Bars Dude LLC name come from? Don't answer that. You know what?
Well, I do want to answer that. My father-in-law, we used to go and go to the bar all the time, and he would come back and tell his wife that we're just two bar dudes at the bar. So that was part of it also.
That's correct that the license was sold, and now you're trying to acquiesce another license from a different location, is that correct?
Yes, the Brady's Irish Pub license was sold, and now we're bringing a different license, trying to.
Okay.
Now, the license from Southampton that you're bringing is a restaurant license. Was it a restaurant license there before? I'm not really up on bar.
It is. It's a restaurant, what's called an R license, retail restaurant.
So you're replacing a restaurant license with a restaurant license?
Yes.
No other questions?
Will you continue to have takeout service as well?
Yes.
Okay. Council, you've heard that a site that formerly had a bar and a liquor license is going to have it again under the same circumstances, within the same footprint, the same kind of operation as existed prior. You're not going to be doing anything beyond that which was previously done while it was Brady's, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The notices that were provided to me of this hearing to the public appear to be in order. So with that, you this time would take comment from the public if there is any, Mr. President.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, a motion would be in order.
I'll put a motion on the floor, Mr. President, that we accept the ordinance for Bensalem Township for the new liquor license for the establishment as described in agenda item number 5, and that's for the request of the Two Bars Dudes LLC, and that's to transfer liquor license number R19579 into the township, Bensalem Township, repealing all inconsistency of ordinances and establishing an effective date, which would be today,
And
It would go into effect 10 days from today, yes.
10 days.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Any questions on the motion?
One other comment, if I might, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Polari, just for the public. This is only one step for the process, obviously. The applicant still has to get approval from the State Liquor Control Board for the license and all other requirements associated with a liquor license. So this is just one step in the process.
And an important one it is. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Good luck.
Thank you.
Those wings are going to be tough to match, you know.
Well, Dawn's going to help me.
Good luck.
Thank you.
I had a bottle of water and I forgot to bring it out. I said I had a bottle of water in the bag and I forgot to bring it out. I'll pay for that.
You're going to probably have people, you want me to go running around?
No, it's okay.
You sure?
Yeah,
Where you going?
just wish I would have brought my glasses.
Taking a break already?
You look good in that face.
Water's
You look good in the face, Lauren.
Number 7 on the agenda is a consideration and approval adopting ordinances amending the Township zoning ordinance, Part 2, Chapter 232 of the Township Code to amend the following articles and sections. Article 5, Section 232-110, 232-124, 232-138, 232-152, 232-166, 232-180, 232-196, 232-226, 232-3102. Article 7, Sections 232-356, 232-357, Article 7, Section 232-380, 232-408, Article 9, Section 232-434, Article 10, Section 232-436, Article 11, Section 232-532, Article 13, Section 232-586. Mr. Pizzo?
Thank you, Mr. Polari. What is before council this evening in regard to this agenda item is the culmination of nearly 2 years' worth of work with the United States Department of Justice. As council will recall, a number of years back, the township was sued in federal court by an entity, the Bensalem Masjid. The lawsuit arose from the denial by our zoning hearing board of a use variance for the construction of a proposed mosque on Humeville Road. The litigation was ultimately resolved by way of a settlement agreement which involved the township's insurance carrier. And there were two facets to that settlement, one between the township and the masjid directly, the other as to the Department of Justice. The aspect of the settlement involving the Department of Justice the township agreed that it would engage the services of a land planner to review the entirety of the township zoning ordinance. The purpose of that review was to determine where, if at all, the ordinance might conflict with the Federal Religious Land Use and Incarcerated Persons Act, or RLUIPA, as it's commonly referred. And that was part of the allegations that were leveled against the township in the underlying litigation. The township engaged the services of that land planner. The land planner made a number of recommendations, largely involving the township's institutional zone and how that zone applies to places of worship within the township. Specifically, the review identified the fact that most of the houses of worship within the township, and there are many, exist on parcels of land that are 4 acres or smaller. The township's institutional zone, however, requires at least 4 acres of land for a religious a place of worship to locate. So the lion's share of the work that the township went about and the lion's share of the ordinance that's before you went to address that disparity and created a new set of zoning classifications for religious land use on parcels of land greater than 1 acre but less than 4. And so those changes, those dimensional changes, have been vetted with the Department of Justice and their professionals, and we have reached an agreement as to those, and those are set forth in the ordinance tonight. The other aspect of the review that the Department of Justice raised were what they believed to be conflicts between places of assembly for non-religious purposes and places of assembly for religious purposes. And their belief and their strong belief that the township ordinance needed to be revised so that wherever the zoning ordinance allows for a place of assembly that is non-religious in nature, the ordinance also needs to allow a place of assembly that is religious in nature. In some cases, there is logic to that. In some cases, in the practical application of our zoning ordinance, it makes little sense. And so we underwent a long and spirited negotiation with the Department of Justice over the last 2 years. It was interrupted somewhat by COVID. But we have landed on an agreement within the zoning ordinance as to changes that would be made so as to bring the ordinance into what the Department of Justice believes is full compliance with the RLUIPA statute. So at this point, what is before you this evening are those changes that we have negotiated with the Department of Justice, that the Department of Justice is at this point in agreement with, and we believe that upon adoption, should you choose to do so, the ordinance will bring the township zoning ordinance into full compliance with the Religious Land Use Act and should save us from any future attacks by any other organizations, be they merit or meritless, as we believe the lawsuit that was brought against us several years was, but nonetheless should make us, I don't want to say bulletproof, but should help us in the defense of any future claims against the township. I should also note and state for the record that the council did meet in an executive session on August 10, present for the executive session where the 5 members of council, the mayor and me, where we discussed the terms of the settlement of the lawsuit with the Department of Justice and how this proposed ordinance fit into that settlement. The council was also briefed on the language of the ordinance prior to them receiving copies of the document. So with that, I believe that's a full and succinct, hopefully succinct, history of what got us to the point that this ordinance is before you this evening. It has been properly advertised in the Bucks County Courier-Times. and is in a form acceptable for your consideration and hopefully adoption this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Pizzo. Do we have any questions from the board?
Yeah, I know that we discussed this before, and I just want to clarify or reiterate that these changes do not affect any existing developments within the township. Those would be grandfathered in, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Sloan.
And then what about any proposed developments that have already been submitted to the township for approval but have not yet received that approval? Or a declination either?
Certainly. Any land development or zoning application which is currently into the township prior to this evening would be guarded against any change in the ordinance. I should restate that ever so slightly. Any application into the township for land use or zoning that was in prior to the first advertisement of this ordinance, which was on August 11 of 2021, would be protected against any changes that result from the adoption of this ordinance. There's a thing called the pending ordinance doctrine, which prevents developers from racing to the township building and planning office ahead of the adoption of an ordinance. So anything that came in August 10 or prior would be protected against any of the changes in this ordinance.
Okay, do we have anything in that might run up against an issue with this?
Nothing that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
No.
And I have a question also, if you're finished, Jesse?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
the question is, the institutional area would be 4 acres, and now it's been changed to 1 acre for non-religious or non-institutional, and a religious institution, or institutional, I should say, is now capable of going in a 1 acre property, is that correct?
Within an institutionally zoned piece of land, yes. So part of the back and forth with the Department of Justice, without going into too much detail, would have had either the township eliminating the institutional zone and having religious uses in all of the other zones of the township by right, which then starts to run into significant problems in terms of enforcement and in terms of taking what is otherwise taxable property off of the tax rolls, or revising the institutional zone where religious houses of worship are allowed by right, and changing the dimensional requirements within that zone so as to allow religious uses on smaller lots.
So an institutional establishment needs only to be 1 acre, as long as it's
1 acre
zoned
minimum, that's correct.
institutional, okay.
Now, you still would have to comply with all of the things you have to comply with, but as a jumping off point, assuming it can fit, you can put your house of worship on a 1 acre lot. Part of the litigation involving the masjid was the fact that the building that they wanted to build didn't fit on the property that they had obtained to build it. And so this doesn't change the concept that whatever it is you want to build still has to fit on the piece of ground that you're trying to build on.
And the definition of institutional is, if you could give me a brief synopsis of that?
Institutional uses within the township primarily are governmental and religious, but I'll give it to you right from the book, as it were. So institutional uses include educational or academic. Those would be public, private, or parochial colleges or universities, secondary schools, elementary schools, day schools, kindergartens, or other educational or academic institutions. Religious institutions, including convents, monasteries, churches, temples, and one of the things that we've done now to to address the lawsuit is we've specifically included the phrase mosque. It was always implied, but now it is specifically stated. Outdoor recreational institutions such as parks, wildlife sanctuaries, country clubs, golf courses, outdoor nonprofit sports facilities, privately owned community institutions such as libraries, museums, art galleries, child care centers, a cemetery, a public service corporation facility such as a telephone office, a post office or the like, or a municipal use such as the building that we're in, the adjacent Central Park, the amphitheater. Those are all permitted uses within the institutional district. Institutional uses which are allowed by special exceptions would include hospitals, sanitariums, medical or health centers, convalescent homes, nursing homes, heliports, radio or television towers, and I believe that's it.
And so institutional is, in fact, non-taxable real estate-wise, is that correct?
Largely.
There can be exceptions.
There are exceptions, but largely the uses would be uses that would not end up on the tax rolls.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against this ordinance change? Seeing no one come forward, a motion would be in order.
I'll put in the form of a motion, Mr. President, that we accept agenda item number 7 as an ordinance and consideration of the approval for the Township Zoning Ordinance, Part 2, Chapter 232. This is for the Township Code to amend the following articles as you had elaborated on earlier in the presentation and presented to us this evening.
I will second that.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you. This should wrap up all of the outstanding issues with the Department of Justice, knock on wood.
I want to read all those numbers again, too.
Thank you, Mr. Pizza.
I want to read all those numbers again, too.
All right, our next hearings it's a 3-part hearing. I'm going to read what each one of them are. Number 8 is consideration and approval of adopting it for an ordinance amending Chapter 232 zoning to create Article 8, Division 3, SRM Street Road Mixed Use District. The second is consideration and public hearing on an ordinance regarding the rezoning of 2201 Street Road LLC, location 2201 Street Road, from zoning classification R11 residential to SMR or SRM Street Road Mixed Use, tax parcel 2-33-26. Number 10 is the consideration of a revised preliminary land development for 2201 Street Road LLC, location 2201 Street Road, the hub at Bensalem, proposed use commercial and residential, zoning classification SRM, tax parcel 2-33-26. We're going to start with number 8. Do we have the attorney for the applicant here? We have no attorney for the applicant here?
While we're waiting for the applicant, Mr. Polari, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. The proposed ordinance, which is item number 8 on the agenda, was advertised in the Bucks County Courier-Times, and the township is in possession of the proof of advertisement. The property that is proposed to be rezoned in item number 9, that rezoning was similarly advertised in the Bucks County Courier-Times, and the property was posted by the Township Building and Planning Department, and proof of posting is on file with the township. And I'll need the proof of notice to the adjacent property owners for item number 10 from the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Pizzo.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to go up to the microphone up there.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Eric Goldberg. I'm the attorney from Stark & Stark for this applicant. And initially, before we go further, let me just address the first comment regarding Mr. Pizzo in terms of the proof of notice. So let me hand that to him.
Thank you.
You can get started while he's looking.
Great, thank you. As the board is, I'm sure, well aware, this application involves what's formerly known, or what's probably known as the Armstrong Track. And there has certainly been many discussions over the years regarding this particular parcel and this particular project. There have been multiple iterations of plans, and we would certainly like to thank the township and certainly its professionals for its guidance and assistance in coming up with what will be before you tonight, which, as Mr. Pizzo had mentioned, is seeking an ordinance amendment as well as a map amendment and land development. I think we can all agree that what is there now at the Armstrong Track is not the most attractive thing, and what is going to be proposed by this applicant is something to certainly improve it for Bensalem. It's improving it from an aesthetic standpoint, certainly a financial revenue standpoint, a zoning standpoint, a functional standpoint. What will be, or what is currently basically just vacant, useless land, will be replaced by combination commercial, residential, retail, and open space, certainly a productive use that we believe will look very attractive and be a very nice addition to Bensalem on the significant street road corridor. In terms of some of the specifics, there's approximately 293,000 square feet of space in this mixed-use project. There will be 40 units of residential. There will be approximately 44,000 square feet of space devoted to office use. That office use will be utilized for the offices of Boston Market and their corner bakery. There's an additional about 175,000 of retail space that's of a mixed retail use, as well as open space and various other related improvements, lighting, landscaping, parking, things of that nature. There are a series of professionals who will be speaking tonight. One will be Tom Comita. He's our planner. Tom has certainly significant experience in this, particularly, most notably, mixed-use development in Newtown. John Caceres will be our engineer, civil engineer. I think you are familiar with him from prior applications. Greg Bianchi is a commercial real estate expert. Greg has experience most notably in the Warrington project, Valley Square. There's Mike Patel, who is a residential real estate expert. Charles Swanson is an economist. He is a doctor at Temple University. Unfortunately, our traffic engineer has a COVID-related issue and was not able to be here tonight. However, we can answer various traffic questions. And we also have an architect. So unless the board has no questions, what we would do is proceed with the first witness.
Well, let's get your people sworn in.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
if you want to bring them all forward and we can get them all
Sure,
sworn
if everybody can please come to the front, please.
Can you slide down, guys, and let everybody up there? Thank you.
Sure.
first and spell your last name for me, please?
David Cole, John Source, K-O-U-T, S-C-O-U, Marcus, Mike, what's up? Meeting.
Can I have one person your name, please? Swear to testify about to the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you.
Tom, if you could remain here, please. And if you could, Tom, please introduce yourself to the board and go over your credentials, please.
Yes. Very good. So, Mike, could you scroll past the planning considerations for a moment?
Might be better up here at the big table.
Okay, very good. So on the screen is my one-page CV. My name is Tom Comita, C-O-M-I-T-T-A. I have a Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture from Penn State, 1971, with a minor in Community Development. I have a Master of Landscape Architecture, 1973, from Harvard University, with a minor in City and Regional Planning. For the last 48 years, I've worked primarily as a municipal planning consultant in Pennsylvania and have assisted 133 municipalities. Currently, my firm, Thomas Comita Associates, Town Planners and Landscape Architects, represents 23 municipalities in Pennsylvania. I'm usually on your side of the table, but about 6 months ago, on the strength of some of the projects that I had helped plan, write ordinances for, do design standards and so forth, I was invited to join the team to evaluate the plan, evaluate and perfect the ordinance, do the landscape plan as a registered landscape architect in Pennsylvania, and in particular do design standards, because in the first couple of drafts of the ordinance amendment that you looked at, it did not include so-called Appendix A. So, Mike, could you scroll to Appendix A just briefly, and I'll explain what that is.
Well, actually, Tom, before you would do that, why don't we just get you qualified as an expert?
Oh, thank you.
And I would offer Mr. Comita as a land planner in Pennsylvania. Okay?
He'll be so accepted.
Thank you. So what was missing from the ordinance amendment as initially submitted, but described in the text of the ordinance, were several design standards: architectural style and elements, building massing, scale, emphasize site development and streetscape design, public spaces and amenities, signage and lighting, walls, fencing, and landscaping, and finally outdoor dining and sidewalk cafes. Before I talk about them and answer any questions, I wanted Mike Stoll to just scroll to an exhibit that I had prepared earlier today because it was the subject of some informal discussion at previous planning commission meetings. So,
And before you go further, Joe, do you want what Tom's about to describe marked as Exhibit A1?
Is this something other than the exhibit to the proposed ordinance?
Yes.
This is new, yes. This is something you
Sure.
haven't seen yet.
Yes.
Then we'll
please.
call A1 entitled Select Mixed-Use Places in Southeast Pennsylvania.
Yes, so at previous meetings,
Do you have, excuse me one second, Mr. Committee, Eric, do you have hard copies of the exhibit for the
Not at
township?
this time. We would send that to you. This unfortunately is just what we have the thumb drive.
I have them. I have 18 of everything I'm
Yeah.
going to present.
Okay.
So would you like me to distribute them?
I think it's beneficial to the council to have the hard copies.
Bear with me 1 second.
Thank you.
So I'm going to hand to Russ, if you could take one and pass it. The first part is what is in the thumb drive at the beginning, which is called planning considerations. And then what Eric just talked about, that's on the screen right now, selected mixed-use places. I'll hand to Russ. If you could take one and pass it. So the question that was asked of me, since I am usually testifying on behalf of municipalities, is what other places nearby could Township Council and others visit, research, inquire about that are similar or have ingredients that are similar? So in order to do that, I want to just describe what does mixed use mean. It can either be vertical mixed use with a different use on the ground floor and above, or horizontal, where you have two different uses adjoining or nearby one another. So on this exhibit that Mr. Goldberg just said would be A1, selected mixed-use places in southeast Pennsylvania, the numeral 1 is simply identifying the hub location about which we are here assembled to discuss and analyze. Number 2 is Steeple View. In Eric's opening comments, he mentioned that. So on behalf of the landowner in Newtown Borough a few years back, I helped to write the ordinance and revise the plan and testify at conditional use hearing on that initiative. Valley Square, number 3. There are other people who are going to testify that could speak more in depth, but ironically, if you take Route 132 Street Road in a northwest direction, you know along 611 in Warrington is Valley Square. And number 4, I wrote the ordinance for Lantern Hill, traditional neighborhood development in the borough of Doylestown. Number 5, Madison Farms in Bethlehem Township, Northampton County. Wrote the ordinance, review all the architectural plans, the land development plans, do all the site inspections. Number 6, the village of General Warren is Charlestown Township, Chester County, of which there are 5 mixed-use developments around the village of Duval. Number 7, Eagle View in Euclid Township, Chester County. In 1991, I wrote the ordinance to enable that mixed-use development. Number 8, Main Street at Exton in West Whiteland Township, near the intersection of Route 30 and Route 100. I wrote the ordinance, reviewed the plans, basically the last 20 years. Number 9, Promenade at Granite Run, former Granite Run Mall site, which was 90% demolished and is now being developed as a mixed-use development with residential and commercial. Number 10, Concorville Town Center, Concord Township, Delaware County. Wrote the ordinance and for the last 25 years have been reviewing the plans, the architecture, and so forth. Number 11, Ellis Preserve is in Newtown Township, Delaware County. So to the extent council would have some interest in looking at other sites, not any one of them are identical, but they all have mixed-use ingredients. When questions have been asked of me in the past, I have anecdotally and informally mentioned a few of those, but there are others I didn't put on the map like the Village of Valley Forge, which is way over the top, bigger than anything we have contemplated. But I wanted to talk about those items. In the packet that was distributed, in reverse order, it has the Appendix A, it has my credentials in the middle, and in the beginning, it has the so-called planning considerations. And so what I'd like to say regarding them is just to summarize the points that are indicated. And so I've been a certified planner since 1977. Since 1995, I've been a board member and committee sub-chair of a group based in Washington, D.C. called CNU, Congress for the New Urbanism. I've traveled across the country and have gone to over 200 mixed-use developments. I've analyzed them, researched them, written about them, and in large part derived important metrics from them. So, in any questions you might ask me about tonight, I can share some of the experience I have from the national perspective. I'm a licensed landscape architect in Pennsylvania since 1991. In comment 3, it talks about the benefits of mixed-use development and gives some examples, like the place.
Benefits are.
Oh, yes. So in terms of benefits, they include, as indicated in 3.1, compact, walkable, diverse development that enables a positive synergy between both residential and non-residential uses in sync with open space uses. To the extent that the 40 proposed dwelling units would enable people who live upstairs to enjoy cafe or restaurant below or work there, I made reference to zero commute housing, promotes an opportunity to live, work, shop, dine, and play in a unified neighborhood setting. Basically talk about the trajectory of these mixed-use developments after World War II, especially since 1980 and 1983. Kind of the poster child of these being in Seaside, Florida and Gaithersburg, Maryland. Talk about the shift in the market to lifestyle centers and villages, and then give some of the examples that were highlighted with the red triangles on Exhibit A1. Lantern Hill was also shown on that map. I gave an example from the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, where I wrote mixed-use development ordinances, and Charlestown and Cranberry Township, northwest of Pittsburgh.
Tom, if you could describe for the board some of the advantages of this particular proposal.
Sure. So the hub has a proposed variety of uses and building types that cumulatively form a compact, walkable, diverse neighborhood where people can live, work, shop, dine, and play in close proximity to all the component elements of the place. And also, as John from Carroll Engineering will talk about, share in pedestrian connectivity and connections to centrally located open space. And John will also talk about the plan and basically the proposed buildings and so forth. In terms of open space, the proposed ordinance indicates a 20% minimum open space. Most of these ordinances have 5 or 10%, but fortunately on this site, there's enough room to have 20% of the open space. There's some reference to parking, which the traffic engineer and John will also talk about later. In all of the ordinances I've written, I've written over 50 zoning ordinances cover to cover. As far as these mixed-use developments, I've probably written over 25 of them, during which time I've had the occasion to use empirical data to look at the actual parking metrics. One of the suggestions, for example, in the proposed comments, or the comments on the proposed ordinance, was for the Township Council to consider 200 feet as the distance from which someone would walk from their car to a building. I parked in the first space I could get just before 7 o'clock, and although my gate is 30 inches, I had 244 steps from my parking space to the front door, which loosely is 488 feet. But I will say this, in all of the ordinances I've written in 48 years, most of the parking where you have a shared and a compact common parking is between 400 and 600. Now, one of the suggestions is to make it 200, but I will tell you this, I've never seen 200 before, but I'm just telling you what my experience is.
And you believe the 400 that's being proposed is satisfactory?
Yes, yeah, and it's normative. And council could ask the Bucks County Planning Commission to weigh in on it, and they could tell you the numbers in every other Bucks County municipality. There are also proposed buffers that we'll talk about, pedestrian accessibility from the network of sidewalks, the design standards that I just gave the subjects for.
Tom, if one of the things you could describe for the board is your thoughts on the density
Sure.
of the residential component of this.
Sure. Basically, if someone asked me, what is the normal density for a mixed-use development in Pennsylvania, Mid-Atlantic states, east of the Mississippi or whatever, and I have looked at probably over 1,000 ordinances, it's usually between 8.5 to 15 units per acre on what I'll call a greenfield site, and obviously it can go up beyond that. But in this case, it's only 1.3. I mean, at 40 dwelling units, that's what it calibrates to. So in the T&M comments, they thought that the number was too low, so did the Bucks County Planning Commission. We're just putting in the number that we think gracefully works with the commercial component at this time. So even though we're low, we're very low compared to most other places with 40 condominium type units.
And Tom, even though you say the number's low, relatively speaking, it's certainly sufficient to provide a viable mixed-use development.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. I would say where it wouldn't is if you only had about 5 units. But, you know, 40 is starting to get some kind of critical mass where people can enjoy either walking to work or a cup of coffee or a meal or shopping, whatever they're going to do, buying groceries, what have you. One of the questions that came up at some point, and I don't know if it was Planning Commission or otherwise, was, is this spot zoning? So I have to defer to your solicitor. He could research all the cases, but if you looked at the Commonwealth Court decision last Monday that came down, where I was the key witness in the Borough of Conshohocken on a spot zoning case, and they cited my testimony about 40 times, where I said in that case it was spot zoning. I am not a lawyer, so I have to defer to your solicitor on the matter. But in my experience, spot zoning is basically creating an island that's unlike anything else around it. So if you go on Street Road 132 from the Turnpike to 95, and you look at all the uses, basically each use shows up on our site in commercial, office, or residential. So it's not spot zoning. And I hope nobody deflates my tires on this, but if I were testifying in this room like 20 years ago on Parks Casino, and someone said, is Parks Casino spot zoning? I would have to then say, well, there's no other casino around like it. So all the case law on spot zoning, again, deferring to your solicitor, would be to create an island unlike anything else. And so you just go around the perimeter of the hub site and you find commercial and residential development and open spaces. So the good news is it shares the commonality of those uses, and in my opinion, it is not spot zoning. So,
Tom, in terms of the overall restrictions incorporated into this proposed ordinance, in terms of the buffers and the setbacks, could you please give in terms of the buffers and setbacks, certainly, could you please give the board your thoughts as to how it works with this particular application?
yes. Well, I would say in the T&M comments, bear with me one second. Don't have my mask. I was double vaccinated February 26th, so forgive me so you could hear me talk. But in the T&M comments of August 18th, there is a memorandum pertaining to petition for change of zoning. And basically, I would characterize all the comments in three ways. One is easy peasy. They pretty much said they've complied with this, or they defer to township council. So that's sort of the first category. The second category is to request consideration of our team on changing some of the metrics. And John will talk about, can we increase the buffer or setbacks or whatever, and gracefully work with the plan. And then the third one is pretty much comments about questions of could everything be better? Could there be a pedestrian impact study? Could there be more landscaping? And so forth. And I would say, and I've asked the team, because I was recommended by Phil Worsta that they would hire me. And I've worked with Phil for many years. He knows that I work mostly for municipalities. Everything I've asked the team to do to sweeten the plan, including send the AutoCAD file to me so I can really beef up the landscaping. If you compare the original landscaping plan to the one I did a few weeks back, we have about 3 times more plants, and it was just because of timing that they weren't able to perfect the landscape plan. So to Eric and Mike and John, I've always suggested, let's keep doing more. Let's make it better. Have more screening, more landscaping, more sidewalks, more open space, and so forth. So I've been sort of your devil's advocate, even though you didn't know that I was doing that.
And Tom, obviously you were qualified as a planner as opposed to a traffic engineer, but based on your experience, could you just give some thoughts as to the parking that's proposed and the ratios proposed for this application?
Well, I believe what John did globally is he did the compliant plan at 5.5 parking spaces per unit. So if you look at the code and you drill down and say, what does the code require? There is like, ta-da, here's the plan that shows all the parking. Based on the empirical experience, 4.8 spaces are shown with the balance in reserve, 199 spaces in reserve. And you'll probably say to them some number of months, like within, I'm just making it up, 18 months of the completion of the project. If Russ or Joe or code official goes to the site and finds the parking insufficient, then the plan shows where the parking would be, and they would have to build it. In terms of assigned parking, there were comments made at previous meetings. Let's not run into conflicts where people who have those 40 condos have no idea where they're going to park. So there's an assigned parking distribution. Where the rub is the question of having the ability to predict where somebody who goes to this cafe is within a comfortable space within the parking lot. And all I can say there is go visit some of the places that are in Exhibit A1. Ask those municipalities, talk to the developers to see how it works. I believe because of the geometry of the site that's shown on the easel, third one back, the good news about the site is it's kind of squarish. It's not long like a bowling alley where you would have a very far distance to get to your parking spot. So there's a certain synergy and proximity of all the parking to all the buildings. That's the best news about the site, because in no case is it too far away, to get to the parking. So that's good, and it's just kind of a serendipity that the site is shaped like it is.
Is there dedicated spaces specifically for the 40 residential?
Yes. Yeah, that was a suggestion, and it was a good one. Yeah.
And if you could just tell them how many spaces, it would be 2 per unit?
Oh, yeah, 2 spaces per unit. We did an ordinance amendment for Kennett Square Borough where we did studio, apartment, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, with much lower numbers. But in Bensalem, with a little more elbow room, and it's not a borough, I think 2 is the right number. So there's no idea to change that.
Okay. And Tom, if you could give the board your thoughts, the council, your thoughts regarding property valuation.
Well, there are other people who are going to testify who have more credentials than me in that area. Anything I'll say, and you can look at this independently, the Urban Land Institute was tasked with addressing this issue. And in 1999, when they started, they produced a publication. You can just Google it. It's called Valuing the New Urbanism. So they used the Kentlands in Gaithersburg, Maryland, started in 1983. By 1999, there was enough empirical evidence to look at all the resale values of all the properties around the Kentlands, which was the former National Geographic headquarters. What ULI found is the property values increased between 4 and 11%, depending on what the dwelling unit type was around. And, independently, you can research that, but you could start with Googling Valuing the New Urbanism, ULI. I think it's a free download, or it used to be, but they keep records on that, and that isn't my specific area of expertise. I'll just give you that citation.
Okay. And overall, just to kind of sum things up, Tom, you believe that what is proposed is a benefit to Bensalem for the reasons you articulated earlier, and it's a good, viable project.
Oh, yes. Now, realize this. I grew up in Manayunk. I lived in Manayunk from 1949 until 1967 when I started Penn State. I moved to State College, a mixed-use neighborhood. I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, a mixed-use neighborhood. I've lived in Westchester Borough for 48 years, a mixed-use neighborhood. Part of that time I was in the village of Marshallton in West Bradford, a mixed-use neighborhood. Had the change in the suburbs after World War II not happened the way it did, everything would be mixed use. So coming to the Planning Commission meetings, I was like Darth Vader, like mixed use. What the heck do you mean by mixed use? Well, everything used to be mixed use until about 1956, and then everything became separate. Everything separate everywhere. Until 1980 with Seaside, Florida, and 83 with the Kentlands. And now you could call Rob Studeville at CNU in Washington and get the whole list of 3,000 mixed-use neighborhoods across the country. He'll give you all the statistics on tract size and density and square footage and mix and so forth. But owing to the scarcity of land, changes in consumer patterns, like I said, the lifestyle center that's indicated in the planning considerations, and people's wish just to be able to walk to places a little bit more. I know when I was growing up in Manayunk, Nirvana was going to New Hope. I mean, that was it. If you got to New Hope, you were on a top drawer Sunday experience. And I think over time, people enjoy going to Newtown, going to Doylestown, and wherever else you go. Or where you go on vacation is often a mixed-use type place. But I think that the waterfront district was an ordinance amendment that Township Council adopted in recent years that started to look at the cross-fertilization of the residential and the non-residential.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
When you mentioned the buffer, I'm a little concerned about what they call from reading the engineering reports, a buffer yard.
Yes.
Okay, along the back of the houses on Hansel Drive, which is existing residential. Of all these other places that you studied, they only want a buffer yard of 7 feet. Okay, I'm 6 foot, so that means another foot higher than me.
Yeah,
If
I'm only 5'8".
If I'm standing up straight. So that's 7 foot buffer with a road behind it. So you have a road coming, an entranceway, and only 7 foot off the back of those properties. I can't see how that adds to the value of those properties.
Yeah, good point, and John will get into the details on it. In previous planning commission meetings, they expressed a similar concern. As a result, the plan was revised to include a fence and additional landscaping. But if you don't think it's enough, we'll have to do more. But we gave it our best shot to beef it up.
Well, then, there was a suggestion in Russ's comments from reading his August 18th letter, I think, that should be at least 20 feet, then plus the regular side yard on top of that, right?
Sure. So, Joe, let me defer. You can
That seems like far off.
put John on the hot seat in a minute. Because
Okay, well,
he knows
you
the
mentioned
exact-
buffers, so that's why I wanted to ask
Exact
you.
numbers, yeah. But, I mean, if we can make it better, we'll make it better.
But do you, any of these other ones that you're saying, these other 9 or 10 ones that you, from the state, are they 7 feet from existing residential properties?
They vary. I know at Lantern Hill, on the north side, there is a Longwood Gardens type berm and planting. On Lantern Hill side and Veterans Lane side, there's virtually no buffer. So it really depends what you're adjoining, but
Yeah, because on the other side, it wouldn't matter as much because it's Coles, you know what I mean? So-
Sure, yeah.
But this side's, okay. So someone else will address that too, you're saying?
yes, thanks, Joe.
Okay.
Any other questions for this gentleman? Want to call your next? witness?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I'm gonna hang around, so if somebody else is asked a question that they defer back to me, I'll be happy to
It's fine.
answer.
Thank you.
And John, if you could introduce yourself to the board and give them a brief description of your qualifications.
Good evening. My name is John Katsouris. I'm with Carroll Engineering. I'm the civil engineer and lead engineer designing on this project. I've had about 20 years' experience in land development. I have roughly 20 years of experience in land development. Do you want me to start from the beginning? I've recently... 6'3". I have about 20 years of experience in land development, working on various projects very similar to this project. We have taken extensive amount of time on this project. We're rolling on 5 years, working with the township, working with my client, making sure that we develop this plan to make everybody happy, as you can see today. I kind of wanted to...
And John, before you go further, you're licensed in Pennsylvania,
I'm licensed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and actually Delaware as well.
and he would be offered as a professional engineer. Okay, John, I'm sorry, go on if you could describe this application, what's before these council.
Yep. So I would just want to give a kind of overall project.
And before you do that, Joe, should we call Exhibit A2, basically just this complete set of drawings?
Well, I assume we're going to be referencing the plans that are currently on file with the township.
Yes.
So they're the plans.
Okay, good enough.
So as you can all see today on the screen and in front of you, this is currently what we're seeing. So this is a 34-acre site. We have a bunch of mixed uses that you can see. You know, we have some office, everything's kind of been touched on. We have residential. We have a community hub in the center. We have a bunch of open space. Our requirement is 20%. We're up around 30%, so we have more open space than is required. We have a lot of pedestrian connection, which we find very important. We're trying to connect to the Coles up above. We have connections to the Bucks Meadows in the northeast. So north is, as you can see, is kind of diagonal up, but I'm going to refer to north as straight up, just for everybody's ease as looking at the plan. So I'll call it Plan North. To the south, we have a pedestrian trail that runs along and connects to Humeville Road, and which will have a crosswalk across to connect to the neighborhoods down below. And we have a bunch of underground stormwater because there are some wetlands in the area that we had to avoid. I know that stormwater is a huge concern on this site. Unfortunately, there's been some tragic flooding in some of the neighbors on Hansel Drive, which we're all very sad about and is very unfortunate. But what we're doing on this site is, the requirement is, just to kind of not get too detailed with the stormwater, but just to kind of give an overview and open up to questions soon. We are required to make sure that whatever water leaves our site is equal to or below what water leaves there today. What we have done is, per different storms, we've reduced it from anywhere from 30 to 40%. So you're going to be seeing 2/3 of the water that you would have seen previously to 40% of, or to 60% of the water. So we're almost reducing all the common storms to almost half the water that you saw before. Now, unfortunately, as some of the residents from Hansel Road have heard last Wednesday when we had a meeting, that freak storm that hit them was a 1,000-year storm. Not only that, but normally a storm is known in a duration of 24 hours. So you have this rain event over a 24-hour time period, and you design up to the 100-year storm. So this was 10 times that storm, and it was all done within a 3 to 7 hour time period. So way less than the 24-hour period that is generally studied and designed for. So unfortunately, and I know no one's going to want to hear this, but unfortunately, no matter what site's here, no matter what project's here, if it's a park, if it's whatever, unfortunately, the flooding that happened in July would have still occurred. What we're doing is we're stopping any storm up to a 100-year storm, which again is one storm per every 100 years. That storm is going to be reduced by 30%. We have done extensive stormwater along that southern property line where you see all those trees and buffer. We put a bunch of inlets, basically these big open grade inlets. So any of that water that used to pond there, that I know still ponds there and used to pond there for at least the last 15 years for you guys, that is all going to be taken into our system, run underground and run out of there. So you will no longer have that ponding in the back. We've also accounted for a bunch of surface water that gets to your property from the Snyder Elementary School, and we're collecting that water and conveying it through our system. And we have a bunch of off-site water that, again, is all collected and conveyed through our system. So the stormwater improvements are drastic. They are over-designed, and that's all by design because we all know how important it is to make sure that you guys don't flood anymore, that nobody floods. And me personally, as an engineer, and as our company, Carroll Engineering, we will judge ourselves on the fact of, does this site ever flood again? And that's our standard, and that's the standard that we're working towards. So that is why this is over-designed. It's not that we're saying, hey, you have 100 CFS currently leaving your site. We're going to have 100 CFS again, which is cubic feet per second. It's a volume of water. We're taking that 100 and we're cutting it down to 60 or to 70 as opposed to the 100. So we are doing a reduction above and beyond what's required, which I think is very important for everyone to understand. And it's very important for you all to know how much work has gone into and how much extra money that this client, the owner of this project, is putting in that is not required. It's all additional. We're also working with the township and will continue to work with the township to look at this off-site stormwater that's coming through, to look at the stormwater that leaves your site, to make sure that the pipes can all handle all this additional flow, not from our site because we're reducing it, so we know that's okay, but we're making sure that all the other stormwater that comes onto your site is also going to be managed, it's also going to be conveyed, and it's going to make sure that that water will exit through your system and it's not going to flood. I know there's concerns that there's a 4-foot pipe leaving. All that is going to be worked out and is in the process of and has already been worked out. So again, our site's reduced. We're now continuing to work with the township to make sure whatever is flowing in that's not our responsibility, it's not our water, is going to be conveyed safely through the site.
John, you said you've been doing this for 20 years. Has Carroll Engineering, or in your professional experiences, does anyone ever design for a 1,000-year storm?
Never. The highest storm that's ever designed for is a 100-year storm. We don't even look at 500-year storm. It's not realistic.
Now, I know as a result of the 100-year, 1,000-year storm that we suffered, since then, I think there have been more rain events, and I'm sure some of the residents will come up and speak to the flooding problems that they've had. What can you say about, a general torrential rainstorm that we get, which does produce a significant amount of rainfall in a short period of time? And it might not be to the levels of a 100-year, 1,000-year storm, but how are those homes going to be impacted by this development, whether positive, negative? What's the change in flows for those?
The change in flows is very drastic, and let me get more specific. So currently, for a 2-year storm, so you guys, we look at different point of interest. So we have in the far northeast corner of the site where we go to Street Road, that's point of interest 1. Point of interest 2. Point of interest 2 is the storm pipe that is on Hansel, where we have that. And you can see that bottom note in the bottom of the page. That's pointing to point of interest 2 right there, exactly. So that's the one that I'm going to key on because I know that's the one that has the flooding and that's the one that's really of concern. So currently, a 2-year storm currently has 43.39. So let's call it 43 CFS that leaves the site. Post-development, we're reducing that to 25 CFS. We're having almost a 42% reduction in that storm. The 2-year storm is the storm that hits the most often. That's the one where you guys get the big rain, it comes really fast, and it just happens all the time. You'll get back-to-back 2-year storms, etc. So that one's
like
reduced.
We had earlier today.
Exactly. Yep. Today, probably all last week. The 5-year storm, which is the next one we look at, that has 65 CFS. We're reducing that to 26 almost CFS, which is a 39.6 reduction. The 10-year storm, 84 CFS. We're reducing that to basically 51.9 CFS, which is a 38.2% reduction. The 25-year storm, and again, these storms happen once every X year duration that I'm going through. So this is supposed to be once every 25 years. 112.2 CFS, we're reducing that to 70.76 CFS. It's a 36.9% reduction. 50-year storm, 136.58 CFS, is being reduced to 88.28, which is a 35.4% reduction. And the 100-year storm, which is the big storms which most likely used to flood you guys out, of 162.83 will now be reduced to just under 111, 110.99 CFS, which is a 31.8% reduction. So we're doing significant reduction at that point of interest, at your concern, at your big flooding area.
Hey, John, I had a question about, this is a little technical, but since you're throwing around the terms.
Sure.
I watched some special after this flooding, and it said that a 100-year storm doesn't necessarily mean it happens every 100 years.
Correct.
Right? So you're saying 100 years, so you think, oh, it just happened now, it won't happen for another 100 years, so why worry about it, This area flooded in 1980, which was 40 years, So a 1,000-year flood could happen twice in 50 years.
It's possible, yeah. These are all just general, and that's These are DEP standards. These are state standards. It's
So when
not
you're,
something
when you're,
that we
when you're
develop.
saying publicly 1,000-year rain, that doesn't mean we don't have to worry about it for 1,000 years, right?
That means the probability is once every 1,000 years. Now, as we all have seen in the past 4 years, rainstorms have gotten more severe, but these are the standards that everybody abides by. These are the standards that we use to make sure that we're conforming to the way rainfall typically happens.
But you're saying any storm would be better than it is now
Every storm, correct.
because of the development?
Very correct, yes.
Okay.
At
Russ.
a minimum of a 30% reduction.
Just two other quick. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to get our township engineer's opinion on this as well, and one of my concerns is even the township infrastructure. I know that there were inspections, we haven't seen the results of those, but, can our own infrastructure handle storms, and are they even handling, say, a 2-year or 5-year storm at this point in that area?
I think, and I respect what John's saying about stormwater, but I think you have to put it in a context. And the context that you have to put it into is what is going on in and around this particular development. And it's one thing to talk about, inches of rainfall and how fast it occurs, but one thing, this particular development is part of a really 170-acre drainage area that comes down to Hansel Drive currently. And the thing that's important to remember is, being that way, the stormwater runoff that's going to come off of this site from the underground detention basins is going to interact with the stormwater that comes from the off-site area. And there is a big existing pipe. John, you're not really touching that pipe or as part of this. And the question is, and this is part of our questions we have, how does it interact? If that water is flowing, no matter what your storm you have, and it starts to interact negatively with the facilities that are on site, then the predictions that the calculations show us can change, and it can change in a negative way. So some of these questions are questions we raise in the land development. We asked John to go back, look at those, how they interact. And then the other thing you have to understand too is, what's the topography downstream? How does the Hansel Drive or Street Road area relate to this? And some of the indications, and once again, we've talked to John about this, is that neighborhood sits in a little lower, a bowl type area. And once again, that's concern that you then have to look at, the duration of the storm. You have to look at the effects that these underground basins have. You have to look at the off-site contribution that comes through the site and how these all interact to judge then, really, and to look at, are the figures that John represents, and I'm not taking exception to those figures or what he's telling us doing is, but is that really the true story when you take all those things into consideration? I think there's no doubt and there's no disagreement in the engineering field that nobody's designing for 1,000-year storms. Nobody's designing for 500-year storms. 100-year storm is kind of the cutoff. But at the same time, when we look at these designs and we understand what happens in the neighborhood and what happens from the upstream drainage areas, those are factors that we really have to take into consideration as, one, John designs them, and two, we review them. So we're still in, that's still a process that's occurring from John's design, our review, and questions we've raised.
So,
Do you think that,
I'm sorry. So have you made improvements to the system in consideration of the existing surrounding system?
Well, that's what we're asking John to look at. We're asking John to look at that to see if there are improvements that need to be made. How are they interacting? Do we need to do that for the design storms that we look at? So that's kind of John's responsibility to look at that as part of his design. He has looked solely at his development and what it contributes, but like I said, there's things that influence what that contributes to the downstream areas, and those things have to be looked at in concert with what he is proposing, and that's what we've asked him to do.
And to clarify too, we did actually look at that. That existing pipe is, I believe, 52 by 34 inches. It's a massive pipe. we did look at that flow coming into our site, and we did make sure that that can convey through the system. And I believe, if I remember correctly, we did a safety factor of that pipe flowing full, which we all know will never happen. But that was the safety factor that we used. We looked at that pipe because we knew the off-site area was so extensive, 170 acres, gigantic. We know that the worst case is that pipe flows full. If that pipe is flowing full through our site, we have looked at that in our stormwater calcs to say, if that's full mixed with ours, this is where we are.
And we even have to just, I think what we've asked for too is to go a step further. How does it all time out? I mean, if that pipe is flowing full for an extensive period of time. How long does that take, and how does that influence the discharge of the pipe? I think John, understandably so, once again, has looked at it as we typically do in design, very statically. We like to even look at it from a timing standpoint too. How do those two drainage areas act together? What he has on site and what's coming down from the off-site area.
When would that be done, and how long would it take to be done?
Well, it's done as part of the land development review. I mean, remember, we're talking now about the zoning considerations. We're talking then land development, and in our land development review, that's where we have, I don't know, 3-4 pages of discussion about stormwater, and that's typically when it's done, as opposed to the zoning issue, which we're talking about now.
Okay.
But how would he be responsible for the surrounding area if it's not his property?
Well, remember, it goes through his, it's part of his stormwater system. It's part of the water that's flowing through this pipe. His water enters into that pipe. So that's how it interacts. You have to make determinations as that water is flowing through, his water is trying to get out of his system.
Okay.
How do those two interact together? And now, I understand what John said about how he did the calculation. There's a tailwater consideration, pipe flowing full consideration. There are other considerations that we allude to in our letter we'd like them to look at too. Obviously, because of the situation that has occurred out there, and obviously the situation that's there. So that's kind of how it interacts.
I got it, thank you.
So, just real quick, so those percentages include the water flow that's coming down north to south, right? Because we recognize the fact that there's water flow that's coming down Humenville Road. Do those percentages take into consideration that additional water flow that's not necessarily dropping on that particular property?
No, the numbers that he's talking about now, where he's showing you reductions between pre and post conditions, are from your site, correct, John?
Yes, I'm not sure what you mean by Humenville Road.
Yeah, it's not taking off-site water into his system and then saying, oh, we're reducing that. He's looking at, as the ordinance tells you to do, look at your site, and that's what you're regulated to do to some degree.
Got it.
But now we know we have other interactions from other drainage areas for this too.
Russ, do you think that the design as it stands now, and I understand that there's some things that still have to be worked out, is that going to improve the stormwater management in that area? You know, specifically for those homes on Hansel Drive?
Well, I think we have to work those things out first before I can make that comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
And it's important to state too that if nothing is done here, if we don't do this development and it sits the way it is, even if that basin that's sitting there today is maintained, that we're gonna experience a lot of flooding issues. So it's very important that we do something here, something specific to the stormwater, and something quickly. Because the longer that we sit here and work through the process, which we're obviously all gonna do, and we're gonna do as quickly as possible, that's the longer that this site sits here and is not being taken care of. So we really need to make sure that we do this as quickly as possible before the next hurricane hits.
I remember on a prior plan iteration, there was an outdoor basin that was on the southwest side. Can you explain? It doesn't appear as if it's on that plan.
Right, so can you go back to that plan that you just had up, the overall? So this is the area that he's talking about where we had a basin out, a surface basin here, which was gigantic. Some of the township officials asked not to have it because of a safety feature or safety issue. But the biggest concern is, you can't really see it, but in the background, you see all these flags in this circle here. This is a wetland that actually, I believe, was created because this pipe used to run through here. This is that offsite water that we're talking about, the big 52 by 34-inch pipe. This has an inlet here approximately and approximately here, which water is supposed to run in, but we believe the pipe filled up so many times and so often that it actually created a new wetland, and now that wetland all of a sudden is identified. So we cannot put an above-ground basin where there's an existing wetland. So because of that, we actually had to go to a way more expensive option, about 3 times the cost in construction, to do all underground basins. And you can, oops, sorry. You can see the underground basins are 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're all the shaded areas that I just pointed out. So it's extensive underground, costly stormwater management, again, going above and beyond what is required, and all at the cost of the owner.
Didn't we talk about that last time? I think last time I sat down with you, we were asking if it was possible to move some of those stormwater facilities underground, and you
Yep.
said, no, we weren't gonna do it, it was too much money.
Yep,
And now you've done it all?
and now we've done it, yeah.
Okay. Got done.
And again, I mean, that just shows how willing we are to work with you guys and how willing the client is to open his pocketbook up and spend money that's not necessary, but is necessary in everyone's behalf.
Any more questions for John?
I have one more question. This is to Russ. The percentage that John has given us, let's say approximately would be 35% reduction overall. However, with the additional information you're providing with us and the surrounding area of 170 acres and such, how significantly would that reduce his figures that he's presenting to us in reality, or would it in fact be less than it is today?
Well, once again, when you look at this, and not to get overly complex about it, is we have like a timed analysis that we do when we size these facilities and we analyze these basin areas or watershed areas. If we establish a point of interest where John's water exits the site, and we combine that with the off-site area, and we have one big drainage area. We say, here's the amount of water that gets to that site, to that point before the development, and then here's what gets there after. That's what we'd have to do to then evaluate what the overall reduction is when you add in the off-site component plus the hub site. And that's how you would evaluate that. John hasn't done that. He's only evaluated his site on that. And then that would give us a true picture of what is the overall effect of his stormwater system.
But it would be less than he's presenting to us today.
I can't, I really want to be careful what I say as far as if it's less, if it's more, if it's a percentage.
Okay, it's just something that has to be
But it has to
considered
be.
then.
How could it be more?
It has to be better, right?
Well, because
The runoff from this site has to be equal to or less than with the development. So if they're showing something that's less than, how could, and I understand what you're saying with the combined flows from off-site as well. How could it?
But that flow's
How
already
could it
coming through the system.
Well,
Right, wouldn't that be part of the existing calculation, the pre-development calculation anyway?
But there's no pre-development calculation at this point in time, and one of the things we looked at, for the overall drainage area. So you're looking at the overall drainage area, and you're saying, that's getting 100 cubic feet per second during a 100-year storm is getting there, all right? Now, John may represent on his site that he's having a 30% or 40% reduction in flows, all right? If you now look at then, what's the existing condition for the overall development, or the overall drainage area, let's put John's development in, let's put John's facilities in, and then do that same calculation. Is it going to be reduced? I'd say yes, it's going to be reduced, but it only may be reduced by a much smaller amount than what's being done by his site. And I don't want to get overly complicated with this. And it's, like I said, if it's 100 cubic feet per second now for the 170 acres, is it going to be 95? Is it going to be 90? Is it going to be 75? I can't really answer that question, but that's part of the questions that John and I have to kind of go back and forth to make sure we have an understanding of how this all works together.
And my questions are more so that I can understand the concept even, but is that more a function of the existing township infrastructure for stormwater management, or is that a function of the stormwater management design being presented?
No,
Or
it's
is it
just-
the combination of both?
No, it's really just a function of 170, having to consider 170 acres of drainage area as it leaves the site, as opposed to his 30 acres. That's all it is. It's not a question, is there bigger pipes, is there basins, what is there upstream? It's just trying to understand what that effect
Okay.
is, because that's what the effect is there. It's just
Okay.
not the 30-acre site.
Right, but one thing to consider too is, no matter how much flow comes from that off-site, it's not gonna fill that pipe full, and we've counted for that pipe flowing full through our system.
Right, but just, once again,
And I'm not saying we're not gonna do that
with
study, but-
I thought we were just talking about zoning right now, as opposed to having
all got
these.
lumped into
Yeah,
one
now
thing.
we're in the, I'm giving a hydraulics lesson to everybody, and I don't want to, John and I don't want to teach that to the class right now. But the point is this, if that pipe flows full for an hour, all right, an hour, and that interacts with John's basin that's trying to get water out, it really acts as kind of a dam. So John, the one statement John says, at one point in time, if I look at this and I consider this pipe flowing full, it won't have any effect on the discharge of those basins. If I say, okay, John, but if it's that way for an hour or 2 hours, what's going to be the effect then? Does it just start to back up? Does the dam stay in place further? I mean, and once again, that's just, it's just kind of things we
No, yeah,
kind of look at.
But Jesse, to your point too, I do believe that that is off-site infrastructure, which is township infrastructure that comes into our property from that 170 acres, which again, we've all agreed that we are going to help out and study that and help find a solution.
Okay.
But it is current infrastructure that runs through our site, through your current infrastructure. We add to that, but we are still, as a whole, even by ourselves or as a whole, we're still doing a significant reduction.
Okay.
Isn't the whole idea of a basin for you to hold your water until it has the ability to get out later?
Correct. It has to drain within 24 to 72 hours.
Right, so if it couldn't drain in an hour, it could drain 2 hours, it would fill up in your basin.
It has to hold for at least 24 hours to make sure. So,
All right,
so we hold it for at least 24 hours, but
Okay.
it has to drain within 72.
okay.
There's no other, any other questions? If there's no other questions, you want to get your next,
Well, actually, we
So I'm
still
just
have
gonna-
some testimony.
I'm just going to do a very quick overall summary of the site. I kind of touched on it, but the overall property boundary, the overall property is 34.90 acres, so almost 35 acres. We have our minimum lot area, our impervious coverage. We're currently, the way our plan stands today, at 57%, which is well under the industry standard. We have multiple front yard, rear yard setbacks. Our open space, again, we're required to have 20%, and we're currently sitting with 31% open space, which is another very large, significant mix for a mixed use. You usually don't see mixed use that high. Usually they're below 15%, usually around the 5 to 10%. Our setbacks are very standard for what you guys all see in Bensalem and for what we have in the other areas. We have building setbacks, we have landscape setbacks, as you'll see on the plan. I mean, we have extensive landscaping around the entire property, along Street Road, along the buffers of our residential neighbors to the south, across the back of the property. Gigantic open space in the upper northeast, which is roughly 5 acres of open space, which is going to be passive recreation, which is going to be able to be used by the township residents. That's pretty much the basic overall scheme of this project.
Is that, you're talking about to the right of there, that's 5 acres that you're dedicating to the
Up in
township?
here. Our plan is to dedicate that to the township. I know that's being worked through, so I'm not sure exactly where we are in that process, but that is the plan.
And that's the property on the right to the, of the display that you're showing us right now?
This area in here.
Right, exactly, okay.
Dedicated meaning, if there was a decision this evening that you would be in agreement to not building on that property for eternity.
Correct. Well, being open space, it goes without saying, but yes,
As in deed restricted to be open space?
yes.
And I think that's the correct terminology. It will certainly be deed restricted. So it will always remain the open, space, to answer your question.
Well, if you're dedicating to the township, does not that become the township property?
I think at this point, some of those issues are still being fleshed out. We know it's definitely going to be deed restricted.
All right, so it's not dedicated, it's deed restricted at this
It
time?
will definitely be correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the only question I have about that is, because that just came up tonight, like before, or just between ourselves a little bit, because my understanding was that we were going to get the property dedicated to the township, and now it's going to be deed restricted because they don't want to. Now, if it's deed restricted as open space, how do we know that township people can use that open space that's deed restricted? It's still private property, so you could say at some point, well, that belongs to the association, so unless you rent an office here or live here, then you can't use it. Like, who makes a rule that if it's not township property, how do we know that township residents can use open space?
In the event that it isn't township property, and I don't know if it will be or won't be, but in the event that it isn't, that could also be incorporated in that there will be an easement and this is how it will be used. So,
And it would be access to the public.
yes.
Okay, and if it's not, then who, would there be an association that would be responsible for cutting the grass? And
Correct.
Any other questions for John? If there's no other questions, you want to bring one of your other,
Actually, before we bring another witness, just something else for John, just to briefly go through some of Russ's comments.
is this for the zoning or is this for the land development?
This is for the petition of change of zoning.
Because we're only doing zoning right now.
Correct.
Okay.
Zoning comments.
That's fine.
So we are mostly going to be will complying to all these zoning questions and comments. We just wanted to touch on a few that there were some statements in here that we needed township council determination. So on page 4, section 232-413.3, lot area and width regulations, number 1. The last sentence in there is we should defer to the Bensalem Township Council for determination as to whether or not the proposed density is acceptable. So in that, we're saying that we're going to have the 1.3 units per acre of land. I know Tom spoke on that, our expert earlier. Previously, we're at 25 dwellings, but with this change, it goes to 1.7 units, which is 40 dwelling units for the site. And this comment asks for council opinion on that statement.
Okay, well, that'll come up. I don't think we're going to give that determination now. We want to hear the whole thing, and then we'll make our determinations when we go to approve or not approve the ordinance.
Sure, I think he was just advising and just letting everybody know.
He was looking for an answer, and we can't give an answer because we're not to that point yet.
Okay, and then there's another one that we'll need to consider, recommending the 60 to 65% impervious. We are currently at 60%. We cannot increase that to 65% because of our overflow parking. So if we don't have the overflow parking, the way the plan sets, as you can see, we are at, I believe, 57%.
57.12, I think.
Thank you, 57.12 exactly. But if we have we have 199 parking spaces in reserve. If that has to happen, it brings us over 60% impervious. That's why we have to keep our impervious number to 65% impervious. Yeah, so currently we're
Well,
below.
if the zoning says 60 though, then then you don't meet the
No,
requirement.
the zoning now says 65.
Currently
No, it
says
says
65.
60. The ordinance,
60.
our township code says 60.
No, the new,
Right,
the
what they're
proposed,
asking for is
yeah.
asking for 65. Somebody leaning up against the lights down there? So you're asking for 65, not the 60 that the code,
Right, currently we're below 60, so currently we meet that, but if you guys require the overflow parking, we're not gonna meet that 60 anymore, so we need to be prepared in our zoning to say, what's the maximum potential build out, we're gonna need that 65%. So we're below 60 right now. Again, if we have to bring the 199 spaces that are in reserve due to a further determination, which we've touched on earlier, we're gonna be at 62%. We're gonna be over 60%. So we need to keep that 65.
Would that be determined when you were presenting us the subdivision and land development, or would that be determined years after this is completed?
The overflow requirement?
Yes.
I don't know exactly what the duration is. I think you guys are all working through that, but I think it was within 18 months?
Yes.
It's within 18 months of completion of the site.
So then we have to consider it at 65 because that's where it's going to be with those spots.
If you bring those spots in, correct.
Not if, that's part of what's there. Russ, do they need
Do
those?
they need those spots?
Let me ask a question, John. Now, let's consider one thing. The zoning that we're asking for here is an SRM zoning. So obviously, some of it's applicable to this development, but we're proposing now an SRM zoning district that's applicable anywhere along Street Road, correct?
With that, whoever has a minimum of 30 acres. So the minimum lot area for that SRM district to even be considered is a minimum of 30 acres.
So now,
So any 30-acre parcels along Street Road, which I don't know if there are any, but they will have the ability to potentially rezone to this.
All right.
Upon your all approval.
All right. And the general commercial now is 60% is what's allowed.
Okay. But again, that's just commercial. This is mixed use, which is a whole different animal.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, so the question is, do we need 65%? I mean, what they're saying is they need 65%.
Right, but what I'm asking is, he's saying something about 199 parking spots in reserve.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
Yeah,
what that
and
is.
I would ask you the same question. I'll explain why you believe you need the 199. What circumstances would the 199 parking spaces be constructed?
We don't believe that the 199 spaces are required. That's why we don't do them. So we did two parking studies. Our parking study, per your original zoning ordinance, requires our parking plus 199.
Okay.
But as we've all talked, mixed use, shared parking, consolidated parking plan, it's been determined that we can use a number, or we're requesting to use a number of 4.8 parking spaces for a residential, or for our non-residential GLA, gross land area. So that would be a 4.8% ratio, which would require 1,143 parking spaces. I'm sorry, 1,052.3, so basically 1,053 parking spaces, plus the residential. So residential, we know we're breaking out separate. We're not including that in the consolidated parking plan. So that's 2 parking spaces per. So that's another 80 parking spaces. So our required spaces per the ratio that we're proposing is 1,132 parking spaces, because it's mixed use. If we didn't consider this mixed use and we did something by the old current Bensalem Township standards, we'd be required to have 1,331 parking spaces. Now, per meetings with Phil involved and everyone else involved, I know a lot of different conversations, we've come up with this number of 4.8 ratio to basically be a consolidated parking plan, which would reduce based on shared parking, because we have some uses that are open at night, some during the day, residential, everything kind of mixed in where they're going to share parking. If you look at some of the other old parking plans where you don't see any consolidated parking, you'll see fields and fields of empty parking lots. We're trying to reduce all that. We're trying to reduce the extra impervious area, which will increase stormwater, noted. So we're trying to reduce all that stuff and make it as compact as possible, but still have the required parking spaces. So we now have a site that is designed for 1,132 parking spaces, which puts us under 60% impervious. We were requested to say, all right, well, in the future, once this thing's working, say during Christmas time or some big event, there's not enough parking. What are you going to do then? That's when we said, all right, we're going to show you on the plan, which you see here, in this shaded area, that's 199 parking spaces, which are overflow. So should, within 18 months of this site being finalized, the township determine that, hey, you guys don't have enough parking, we want you to go to our original standard, we will then be required to put in those 199 spaces to make sure that you're parked per your original zoning.
And John, just to make sure everybody understands, even the whole overall development is being designed at 5.7 with some of those spaces being held in reserve.
Correct.
The applicant would do a study afterwards and consult with the township. And if the township, in its discretion, said, yes, build that reserve parking, or build a fraction of that reserve parking, it would be done.
Correct.
But could we not just offer you the 60% impervious surface, and if indeed you needed to increase the parking by 199, have a contingency within the zoning itself that you would come back to us and ask for the extra 5%, 65% impervious surface at that time? Doesn't that make sense to me?
Well, I think the concern is what
above
happens at
60%
that point in time
council approval.
if we were requested to do it, but we didn't have the relief needed to go above 60. I think that is part of the concern.
Well, so what if anything above 60% up to 65% requires a different approval by council? That way they have to come back in front of us, justify the need, show a traffic or a parking study that proves that it's warranted, and then it puts it on us to decide.
The only,
Additional parking
Yep.
or the.
the only point that I'd like to bring out, and I'm not advocating one position or another, but I'd just like to remind everybody that as part of the discussion that we're having on the creation of a new zoning district, you are creating a new zoning district.
Right.
So it is a district that could apply not only to the Armstrong property, but any other, if you were to adopt as proposed, any other 30-acre parcel along the Street Road corridor. So whatever it is that you're going to do for this site, theoretically, you're doing for any other site along Street Road that would meet the minimum lot acreage. So just keep that in mind during these deliberations. I know that we're focused on the plan that you see up there, but please keep that in mind as we're having zoning
You know,
discussions.
the other thing that comes to my mind, and I know we've talked about this before with the team, and this is no reflection on any of you, but the neighboring property, the Cole Shopping Center, my understanding is that you've always gone through the possibility and are leaving it open to have a cross easement where traffic could end up flowing through that parking lot, which would provide excess overflow parking as well as pedestrian access. Have those talks progressed at all? Because I think that would alleviate all of this.
The answer is they haven't.
It's our desire to,
Yes.
but we're at the discretion of the Coles ownership right now, and we
Which,
haven't gotten any further.
okay, and for the record, I mean, you can drive by the Kohl's parking lot at any given time throughout the year, and it's an empty parking lot, except for immediately in front of the store.
And that's true, but this is different than
I
what Coles
agree.
is. So to me, you have to make sure that you go to the maximum, because we've done so many times, and if you don't have an agreement in place, and you
No,
make an
I'm more
approval.
about getting an agreement and
If that
getting these
agreement's not
properties to
there-
work together.
Right,
But
because it's not, you're
Since
in that
this
problem.
applies to other, it's going to apply to other I mean, I know it's going to be few and far in between that there's 30 acres along Street Road, but Parks Casino has 30 acres somewhere there. But there could be other people who have 30 acres, but that's why I would be more wanting to keep it at 60% because it applies to other people too. So if we give you 65%, then we have to give everybody 65% in the future. But I don't know that it'll happen. But if we do 60% and then later we say, well, if we make you do parking, we can't make you do parking and then make you keep 60%. We can't make you do two things that are opposite of each other. So if we make you do parking, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. And if we say we're making you do the parking, we're gonna have to give you more impervious search to make the parking. Or you can make it out of stone or something, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, stone is also impervious, but that's a fair statement. My only concern is, I guess whoever is voting, we'd have to tie that together somehow in the ordinance. If it's required to do the overflow parking, it's also required to give a variance or whatever the relief is for the extra impervious. I don't think that's an issue whatsoever.
Well, who's requiring
I'm
the
gonna-
extra parking? That's the question I have.
Nobody's requiring it. He's saying he may need it later on, is
After
what he's
18
saying.
months,
We're
they want us to
saying,
know
we're
whether
saying you guys have the power
they're
to
depending on
require.
parking.
Right now, we're saying we don't need it, but in the future, within 18 months, if you're seeing in a cycle that there's more parking than we have, and it's at your discretion, we're giving you guys the power then you can tell us to
Does the
put
way that the
199.
code is written, assuming that the code was changed to 60%, do you meet the SRM requirements?
Current, yes, we're at 57.12%.
No, for impervious.
I get it. Parking. Is parking part of this code?
Yes.
And so if this gets approved, this site as it stands without the 199 meets the SRM parking requirements.
Correct.
So there would be no township enforced need for another 199. If the site feels that after 18 months of operation, they feel that they have insufficient parking and they want to come back and expand it, then they'll have to seek a variance.
No, I think it's the opposite, though. You're saying it's they meet the
I agree.
60%, but they meet the
Thank you,
60,
Mr. Kuspak.
yeah, they meet the 60%, but it's not gonna be up to them whether they want more parking or not. It's gonna be up to the township to tell them that they need more parking. It's not gonna be up to them.
Why would we? We would have no legal
it's
right
not.
because the
That's what
SRM
They come
requirement.
to us.
I-
It's for them, if they need parking and they are not that intelligent enough to put new parking there because it's going to be better for their clients, then shame on them. So they're going to come to us, and as you just said, and I agree, then we would say, okay, we'll be happy to give it to you, we would love to give it to you, and we'll give you a variance to do it.
Exactly.
That's it, exactly.
All right, it's up to you.
I think that's the way we have to move forward with that.
I
Keep it
just
at
wanted
60%.
We
to
keep it at
take
60%
1
and it
minute
meets
to
the
talk about
ratio.
parking. The King of Prussia Mall is parked at 5.5 spaces per 1,000. It came from a 1955 study that was done by the Urban Land Institute. By 1983, ULI hired Barton Ashman from Chicago to do shared parking first edition. In 2005, they did second edition. On behalf of all those municipalities I mentioned I work for, I did 2 empirical studies. I have a Nick Foles mask one. If the Eagles get Nick Foles back, P.J. Wellahan's in Duval parked at 10 spaces per 1,000. And when Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom played at Conquerville fourplex, 10 spaces per 1,000. But all across the country, these discussions of parking have come up, and all the empirical studies on new urbanist development have 3.3 spaces per 1,000. I said to the group, we're not a mass transit train station site. We don't have like robust bus service. Instead of using 3.3, which I mentioned in the planning considerations, let's go to 4.7. Let's go beyond all of the studies. And it's during these peak events, John talked about Christmas, but when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, everybody was overparked. But at 4.8, I'm sorry, at 4.8, it is a safe harbor position that we would defer to your traffic engineer, Phil Worstall, on. He's much more experienced than I in this. But I write zoning amendments for a lot of municipalities, and I feel that the 4.8 is a reasonable amount, which is why it's in the ordinance.
So are you at 3.3 or 4.8 now?
We're at 4.8, and that's what our ordinance states.
Okay, so you're like confusing the whole issue as far as I'm concerned.
He was just saying 3.3 is standard,
John,
and we're going above and beyond standard.
Who determines in 18 months whether you need more parking or not?
We give you the power to do that.
The township does.
If you're getting
That's what I'm
complaints,
saying, the
if you're
township
seeing,
does.
correct, the township
So the
has the power.
township says that you need more parking. You don't come
Then we have to
us.
put it in.
Right, that's what I was saying. That's what you said the first time.
Correct.
But you can't do that unless the township
Unless we
gives you
increase to 65%.
the extra 5% that you need. And at that point, then you're stuck. If you need more parking and you're at 60, and the township doesn't give you that relief, then what do you do?
That's why we have to tie it together.
Correct. And basically, we are letting you balance the need for parking versus impervious coverage. You would balance those things and say, yes, you add 10 more spots, 50 more spots, whatever you believe is appropriate. It's 100% in your discretion.
As an engineer, it's our responsibility to look at a site and design a site to the least amount of impervious possible, because we want the least impact to the environment. We don't want to kill trees. We don't want to cut down grass. We don't want these big, massive parking lots. We don't want impervious area. We try to reduce that as much as possible, and that's why we had Tom's expertise saying, all right, well, 3.3 is industry standard. We don't necessarily have the infrastructure with buses like he just stated, so maybe we need to bump it up to 4.8, which should be well more than adequate. But if it's not, we have the ability to go to the Bensalem standard of 5.7, which is those additional 199 spaces.
Well, if you were made to have to
You
go
just said
to,
5.7.
5.7 is the design per the township standard. That's what it breaks out to. That's what that extra 199 spaces would be.
now, if you were made by the township to do what our ordinances say with the buffers, that you're 10 feet or less than 10 feet in some places up to the residential neighborhood, what is that going to do to your situation if that's not allowed?
That's the next paragraph. then.
Our situation as far as what, parking?
As far as what you need in the property, because now if you have to move out another 50 feet plus the 20, that's 70, that's going to change your whole plan as it's designed right now, right?
Well, the setbacks are for buildings. It's a building setback, and we meet that. We're currently over 50 feet side yard setback, which is where that is. That's our side yard.
Yeah, but your buffer on that side, it says, the provided buffer regularly indicated along any property line, a landscape buffer you shall provide shall not be less than 10 feet in width, except 10% of the buffer could be reduced to 7 feet. The proposed buffer does not appear sufficient or in line with the intent and purpose of the proposed zoning district, according to Russ.
Right.
All right, so if it's not in,
So we could increase
if
the
it's not-
landscape, we could increase the landscape buffer, which is another comment. We could increase that to
and
15
what
feet.
does that do to your design?
If we increase the landscape buffer to 15 feet, it doesn't do anything to our design. It's still outside of that road setback.
Why wouldn't you make it 15 feet in the first place then?
Because we've gone through so many iterations of these plans, at some point, it must have been closer. There's also a bunch of infrastructure in
All
there.
right, so are you willing to change that to 15 feet?
The
The buffer?
I think Russ
The
said-
landscape buffer, we can change to 15 feet. Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, but yes.
I think Russ, did you recommend 20 or 15?
We recommend 20.
For a
You recommend
landscape buffer?
20? Yeah.
I believe it was 15 feet for landscape
No, I
buffer.
think it's,
On page 4, at the very bottom, setbacks and buffers, comment 1, the T&M letter says, provide a minimum buffer yard of not less than 15 feet in width.
Yeah, and I'm saying we can do that 15 feet.
plus the setback, right?
It's not plus, it's in the setback. The landscape buffer is within the setback. They don't add to each other, they're within each
Russ,
other.
if he's 15 feet off the property line, okay,
Yes.
then how much further is it that he can have a parking lot or a building?
If it's 15 feet, if we use the 75-foot requirement, then it's another 60 feet before he has a parking or building.
Okay, so do you have this 15 feet plus the 60 feet?
That 100 feet's in the rear yard, and that's only building setback, that's not parking setback. Those are two separate items. A building setback is different than a parking
He's an
lot
engineer,
setback.
I'll just ask him, you know.
Well, I want to make sure we're referring to the same thing, because it's in section 232-593 is where we're stating as far as buffer yarding requirement goes. So 232-593 is where that requirement is.
Which number is that, Russ?
It's actually in section D on page 8.
Yep.
Is more of that discussion.
Yeah, so number one, we have no objection, which you guys stated. So the only one I'm guessing is number 2. And that's where we get into
Yes.
along a property line or a landscape buffer yard shall be provided not less than 10 feet in width. So that's where we're saying we can increase our landscape buffer per this comment to 15 feet.
And then do you still have 60 feet beyond that before a parking lot or a building occurs?
That's not correct. So the side yard setback is 50 feet, but that's a building setback. It's not just anything setback. So we have a road in there, and I don't think we have parking in there, but
Well, Russ, is that correct or incorrect?
Well, that's why I'm just going to look at exactly what 232-593 says. 232-593 says when the district referred to in section 232-592 but any rural or resident district boundary line, a yard shall be provided which shall not be less than 75 feet in width measured from the rear of the 20-foot buffer yard and planting strip reference in section 232-592-1. And then the exception is in certain R33, R3A, and AD, the 75-foot should be measured from the boundary.
Can a road or a parking lot be within that 75 feet or no?
I don't believe it can be.
Okay, well, he's saying it can't be.
I have to look, and I want to look at
I
that.
believe that is correct, because we're talking buffer yards versus side yards. The buffer yard, what can be in a buffer yard isn't necessarily the same as what can be in a side yard or a rear yard.
Okay, well.
And this is not, and it's 232-593 does not distinguish that as a side yard.
No, it refers to it as a buffer yard.
Correct.
Yeah, and a buffer yard setback and a normal building setback are completely different items. And they're written different in our ordinance and in your ordinance.
So Mr. Pizzo, can the road be within the 75 feet to 15 plus this 60?
I do not believe so.
You don't believe so either?
So you guys are trying to tell me you don't have any roads or parking lots in your building setback, within your building setback?
Again, we're talking building setbacks versus buffer yards.
Right, so buffer yard is 15 feet. We don't have anything in that 15-foot landscape buffer, just landscaping. So that's clear. But the building setback line, which is the setbacks that you guys are referring to with the 75 feet, which the rear yard's 100 feet, side yards are 50 feet, the front yard's 25 feet.
It's only when a commercial property abuts a residential property. It's not in every case.
That's not the way our ordinance is written.
Right, that's not the way
Well,
yours is.
well, that's the way you
Yeah,
wrote
we
the
know.
ordinance, but that's the way general commercial is in our township.
Right.
Is that if you're a general commercial, which the first building is a supermarket or something, right, or a gas station, right? What is it?
Yeah, the first building is undetermined, but it's retail.
Okay, so it's retail. So if you have a retail property in Bensalem, then the side yard, then you have to be 75 feet minimum off of another residential property before you can have anything.
Okay?
That's what I'm saying. It's not.
Yeah, because 593 refers back to 592, and 592 is all about buffer yards.
Right.
It's not about side yard setbacks.
Right.
It's about buffer yards.
Right.
And then what 592 says is about what can or can't be in a buffer yard.
Right, and we're 100%
Well,
compliant
it'll be
with
different,
what's
it'll
in
be
a buffer
different when
yard.
Coles is on the other side, or it's different in a residential area, which is a buffer of 25 feet combination of the two side yards.
Right.
But Coles is different too, because that's general commercial against general commercial. But I'm talking general commercial against a residential property.
Right.
And as an example, if you have an institutional use against, just so you understand, institutional use against a residential district, you have to have a 100-foot buffer that's totally in grass. That's
Right.
what that's referring to.
Right, and the biggest thing to note, though, is this is not a commercial use, this is not an institutional use, this is a mixed use, which has residential and commercial. It's a completely different use.
We get that.
We get that.
And what we're saying is, in our review of that, there should be, you can consider, or you could consider, whether you want to have this type of use fall within the same requirements that are currently in 592, 593. What John is saying is, we're offering something completely different than what's in your ordinance now. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, but I think what Joe was saying is that when we have and even a mixed-use property, basically, it's a commercial use property with some residential occupancy within the 30, 40 acres itself. And so when that touches a 100% residential property, we want to make sure that's buffered. We don't want to have 15 foot of buffering and that's it. I don't know what we're asking, what the requirement is, but I mean, we got to be looking for 60, 70, 100 feet something where there's a
Yeah.
buffer between the neighborhood. 10 foot is,
Let me be more clear, it's not just 10 feet. So we have a 15-foot landscape buffer, and in that, we beefed up, we have arborvitae, which I don't know if you all know what arborvitaes are, but
I
it's
don't
the-
care what the,
Okay, so it's a
what that
15-foot
is.
landscape buffer, but our building setback is 50 feet. So we're more than 50 feet from the property line to our first building.
So there is a building setback of 50 foot plus 15 foot.
Not plus.
No, they're just allowing the road in there, that's all.
Right, so we're saying
putting a
nothing's
road
in the
in.
buffer, but in our setback, we have a road in our setback. But our building does not start until 50 feet minimum from the property line.
And the road starts further than 15 feet.
The road is probably 20 feet off the property line.
Yeah, can you use the microphone, please? Not what he's saying.
Sorry.
Can't hear you back there.
Hello, hello? It's on.
All right, well, what I'm saying to you is this, I don't think that's sufficient, and I don't believe the residents would think that would be sufficient relative to saying, we're having a road there, and we're considering that to be some type of separation between the project itself and the residential properties.
So what we are proposing is that 50-foot side yard setback.
I don't understand.
Yes, John, what I think the council is saying is, when you look at these requirements, as I read, when you have, like as an example, an institutional use against a residential use requires a 100-foot in-grass buffer yard
Understood.
between that use. It's not a side yard, it's grass. And I think what council is saying is, they're looking for something, that 15-foot or 10-foot, you want it to be larger and in some type of landscaping.
A buffer between
Right.
residential.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, you could have an argument if the first thing on the other side was condominiums. Because then you could say, well, it's buffered by the condominium, so I'm using residential side yard setbacks, but you're using residential setbacks and putting commercial property against residential. Saying
Understood.
it's mixed use, so it doesn't matter. But
We're not saying it doesn't matter, we're just saying that we should be reducing what you guys are typically using for a mixed-use neighborhood.
Okay, and we're saying we don't agree with that.
Okay.
That's our argument. Okay?
Yeah, there's some
You're
negotiating
proposing
here,
that,
but I
and we're
don't
saying
know.
that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, so that's the problem.
Okay. Another thing we haven't really discussed is almost I think is like written in stone that there's going to be 2 parking spaces per residential dwelling.
Correct.
Well, what's a residential dwelling, number one? What's the definition?
It's the same definition that you guys have currently.
Well, not really. Is a residential dwelling, is that considered to be an apartment? Is
For
that
us, it's a
residential?
these are all condos, no apartments.
So,
These are
then
condominiums
I
that are
think
for
you
sale.
referred- Then it's got to be
But in your
referred-
zoning, it doesn't say that.
And that's something we could agree to amend.
Right, okay, so it has to be described as a condominium dwelling, accepted by our engineers in terms of that.
Yes,
But-
we can work with Russ to flesh that out.
But that being said, I mean, you have to illustrate, at least to me, that 2 parking spaces for a residential dwelling, a condominium, it suffices. Now, I'm sure there may be an argument on your part, and I'm certainly willing to listen to that, but our normal parking requirement is 3 parking spaces per a residential dwelling.
Per a single-family detached residential dwelling?
Townhouses.
Per townhouse?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the size of a townhouse compared to a condo. They're not very comparable, in my opinion.
Well, you have 80 dedicated parking spaces for residential, but again, there's how many spots for the entire site? 1,000, how many?
1,100.
1132.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's not that there's no parking, it's a question of dedicated parking, I
Well, the
think.
overflow could be used.
Overflow could be
Right.
anywhere in this entire mixed use.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
guest or
the
something, but
purpose
that's-
of the mixed use again. the
Guest, or
consolidated
if you
parking.
have a child, if you have kids that are drivers, it could
Absolutely,
be, it could be 3.
Yeah.
So if
Too
you
many
have 3
people
cars in each one, your 2 per spot per unit isn't going to work, because you could have, how many bedrooms are these condos?
So it's going to be limited. The condos will be limited to, the residents will only be allowed to have 2 parking spaces per
I didn't
condo.
ask you that question. How many bedrooms are they going to be?
There's a mixed use.
There's a cap on.
Mike, if you could just quickly identify yourself first.
Mike Stoll, counsel for the applicant. There's a cap in the ordinance on the size of the units. There, no more than a certain percentage can be more than 3 bedrooms. And on average, the ordinance limits how many that can be there. So the sizes are limited, and the parking is provided by the size. So only a small number can have more than 2 bedrooms, but the majority will be 2 bedrooms or less.
Okay, so if you have 2 bedrooms and you have a husband and wife are in one, and then you have an older child that's driving in the other, that's 3 parking spots. And if all of them have the same, you're not going to have enough parking spots for those residential units, the condo units. So what Ed is saying, we want 3 per, because that's what makes sense. We see it in all the condominiums throughout Bensalem. We have this issue where they have more other family members or guests that are staying at their places, and it's more than 2 cars. It gets to a point where you don't have enough dedicated parking for your units. And if you're doing dedicated parking, what Ed's saying, I think, is you should have 3 per each unit. And I agree with him.
And I understand that, unfortunately, some of this kind of goes into various other experts. We do have coming up a residential real estate expert, and one of the items that he will be discussing is exactly who's going to be buying these properties. And it's not necessarily going to be, and obviously, there are possible exceptions. I mean, nobody knows who's going to buy them. But the market is not going to be a 47-year-old couple with an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old.
And you can guarantee that?
Of
You're gonna
course
put that
not.
in- Of course not. So we have to look at it at the worst-case scenario, what it's going to be, because we already have those issues throughout our township with condos that were given 1 or 2 spots per household, and then they have a child or a guest, and that's 3, and it becomes a problem because then there's not enough parking for those units. So that's one of the things, that's one of the things that I'm concerned about.
But keep in mind, we still have 1,100 parking spaces in addition to those 80 parking spaces for overflow. So we have parking fields for overflow parking, unlike residential neighborhoods, unlike townhouses, unlike other areas. Because this is mixed use, we have the ability to park the whole parking lot with a party for Christmas, because
Because no
stores are
one
gonna
will
be
be there
closed.
shopping during Christmas, is that what you're saying?
not at night when they're having their Christmas party or whatever.
They start at what, 12 o'clock for the Christmas party? Because the stores are open at 12 o'clock.
Not my parties.
Exactly.
I mean, from a shared use parking concept, when you start to look at various peak hours of when parking is going to be needed by certain different units, I mean, how would overflow work? Is there sufficient space for those, if there are 3 cars per unit, is there sufficient space on site given the peak traffic?
So our last submission that we did in on May 4th, that we had discussions about, we did a parking study per UTI, which is a very well-known study, which Tom Comita spoke about earlier. And the required parking spaces for this mixed use was 922 parking spaces. That's what they require. That's what they think we need for mixed use. We're over parking that by over 200 additional parking spaces. So we have cushion built in. That's why Tom Comita came up with the 4.8 number, not using what UTI, Urban Land Institute, ULI, came up with, which would have been 922 spaces.
Now, in a worst-case scenario, if you needed extra park, it was determined 18 months that you don't have enough parking, and you did the overflow parking, with that 196 overflow parking that brings up to 65% pervious, is that adjacent to where the people will be living to take advantage of?
Correct,
parking?
yeah. You can see, I don't know if you can see.
Because you can
So,
say you have mixed.
Residential,
Say you have shared parking, but no one's going to
here's the new lot,
park,
so it's-
no one's going to park at a Boston Chickens or
So if you're looking at the plan up there, so this is the 80 spots reserved for residential.
Right.
This is the overflow parking, right adjacent to that.
and how close is that to where the residential are going to be? Not the parking, but
Those 3 central buildings.
Residents here, here, and here, all around the park.
okay.
So it's right there. It's within the 400 feet.
Okay, so.
Okay, do we have any other questions at this point? You want to go to your next, or do you have any more things you want to pursue? All right, we'll make this.
Yeah, so we kind of skipped around. Keeping that parking design. So In letter E, chapter 232, zoning ordinance, number 1, letter B as in boy, you're asking us to revise the residential parking space calcs to kind of get on this calc again, to include employee parking requirements. And I just want to reiterate that 4.8 is more than the shared parking. We are accounting for that in that. It's not that we're breaking any of this stuff out separate. It's that we're asking to use that one rate that will be supported by a parking study per request. And it's already accounted for. So we're not breaking that out. We're accounting for that. We're including that in our current parking calcs. So I just wanted to clarify that that is included. It's just not broken out that we have X amount here, X amount employee, X amount of this. It's all included, all together, all consolidated.
John, one question. This plan is, I guess, not one of the record plan sheets,
That is the
correct?
overall record sheet.
That is the record sheet?
Correct.
So the 199...
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's the consolidated parking plan.
Okay, so the 199 aren't shown, I believe, on the record plan.
Correct.
If the 199 get built, they'll encroach into the 5 acres of open space?
Slightly, yes.
How much is slightly?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it reduces it to maybe 4.5 acres. I think we eat into it by a half acre.
Okay, thank you.
Roughly.
But you're going to dedicate that land now, so you're not going to have that land to go to. If you're dedicating it to open space, you're not going to be able to go into that land because it's dedicated open space.
Right.
Mr. Paizo, is that correct?
So we're going to have to not dedicate this portion of it at this time, in case you guys make us go into that overflow parking. So while we are dedicating that area as open space, it's not that entire area because we have to account for the potential of you making us.
How much are you dedicating? What's the size of that land and what are you dedicating? Because things just keep changing and I'm not understanding. 1 minute you're dedicating the whole thing, now you're not dedicating the whole thing. How many acres is it? What's the acreage? And let's get it to the point so we understand exactly what you're looking to do.
Well, that would get us more into the land development as opposed to the zoning.
I understand that. But once we do the zoning, I want to know before I do the zoning what your intent is.
My intent is to have over 20% as required open space.
Okay. So it could be half of what's there now, once you get in, if you need other things as you're going along.
Currently, the way it sits today, it would be all that area minus the potential of that extra build out, plus all that area where, this area where the basin is, plus this area down here, plus the area connecting to Untitled Road.
And how much is that space-wise?
How many acres? I don't think I have that.
So can people use on top of the retention basin that you're burying, can use that ground?
It's not going to be over there anymore. All the retention is going to be underneath the parking lots. But that area over there is all going to be accessible now, besides where the wetlands are, obviously, because they're not going to want to play in the wetland.
Okay, so it won't be in where the basin was? It won't be under there?
Some of that will, the new underground basins are going to be
In the gray areas, you said?
in the gray areas, correct. So they're going to be here, 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 and here, all under parking.
So that other area that juts out to almost where the walkway is
Yeah.
additional open space on top of the
This
supposed
right here
5
is
acres?
where the old basin used to be.
Right.
That's all additional open space, correct.
And that'll be either dedicated as open space or given to the township?
That's correct, because there's no future expansion, potential expansion for that parking lot. The only thing that you're not seeing here is, as per that old consolidated plan, which is that extra 199 spaces. We clearly can't de-restrict that until we get past our 18 months. I don't think we're going to have any objection to dedicate that after that 18 months. If you guys did not want us to expand the parking, I don't think that would be a problem to dedicate it at that point.
But I'm sure you did not say this, but I want to make sure. The 5 acres that you want to make deed restricted, not dedicated, that's what you had said. To make it deed restricted, not dedicated. Is that part of your open space, your calculations of the 20%?
Correct. Currently 31%. That's all our open space and open recreational space is all going to be deed restricted for building.
With the exception of the overflow parking lot.
Thank you, yes.
And then in 18 months, 18 months post-development, if you don't need it for overflow parking, you will also deed restrict that.
Right. Yes.
But then based on what Jesse just said, then I'll say that 4.5 acres of deed restricted land is part of your calculation for open space.
Correct.
Well, that's why you have the open space.
Yeah.
At the high percentage you are.
Yeah, we're at 31% open space.
And they want to keep it there in perpetuity.
Yeah, the only other open space is that little community center in the center of the building, right?
That's a half acre in the middle. Yep.
And they have a half acre in the
It's that
But we
whole-
don't want to set up
the
a
whole right side of
situation
our
where they
site.
could come to us for a variance 10 years down the road and say, okay, now we want to build something here, or whatever it is. By deed restricting it, we prevent them from doing that.
Right.
And
Right.
we maintain it as open space in the township.
And the extra parking is actually the township's choice, as he clarified again.
But it will be
Correct.
open space to do what?
Recreation, passive recreation.
Which means to do nothing.
So along this line down here that goes down to Humboldt Road, you can see in the very bottom south of our site, that connecting road, it's gonna have passive recreation. You know how when you see walking trails where you have pull-up stations and dip bars and all that kind of stuff? We're gonna have stuff like that up along that area. The park in the middle is gonna have park benches, picnic benches and whatnot for people to come there and eat lunch. And it's undecided what's gonna happen with that 5-ish acres that we've been talking about in the far east, because it may turn over to the township.
But more than likely it won't, because initially I thought we were getting that land, and, I don't know, purchasing land, I meant to say. Initially I
For
thought it was
cheap.
going to be. What's that?
For cheap.
For cheap.
Well, if it's going to be deed restricted as open space, we don't need to.
But when you can't build a
Can't build
soccer
baseball
field on
fields,
there.
soccer fields.
I thought that's what we're doing.
Because there's deed restriction, they're saying it's.
If you put that in the deed restrictions, you can put a soccer field there. You just wouldn't be able to build a building there.
So you can't do soccer or any other.
We can write that language however you see fit.
benches.
So that could be deed restricted, and you would rent us that property for $1 a year.
I'm not sure
Yeah, I
that
don't
would
know
be
about
worked
the
out.
economics. What I can say is in terms of the uses that are allowed or not allowed, that can certainly be worked out to permit or not permit certain uses.
Well, I don't think we're gonna build a soccer field on your property. If you lease it to us, like I said,
Right. But we would build into our language that ability, is what we're saying. So if you guys negotiate with the owner and the township, and all of a sudden it's gonna be sold to you for whatever, and then our deed restriction, we would make sure that it could say, you could build a soccer field here, you could build whatever your future plans could potentially be. We're giving you guys the power and the option
What's
to
the
do that.
benefit of, I know it's ground, so it's worth a certain amount of money, but if you're restricting the ground use to open space for the public, what's the benefit of the developer keeping that ground, except that he's gonna have to cut it? So if anything, it's gonna cost him money over the years. If he can't do anything with it except maintain it for other people,
Right.
then why does he want it?
Why does he want what, the land?
Why does he want the ground? Why don't he, if you
have.
He needs it to maintain the open space ratio.
Right, we
No,
need that per
we'll allow it.
ordinance.
If he gives it to us, we'll give him the open space.
Right,
But then he no longer would meet the code.
No, well, it's
But,
It's up
no,
to us to
no,
make the
but this is a code that's being implemented for.
No, I think if he donates that open space, Joe, that doesn't mean he doesn't meet the open space code.
There's a whole lot of what ifs, that's
Typically,
all I'm
what
saying.
we've done in the past under those circumstances, Mr. Knowles, is that if a piece of property of that size were to be dedicated to the township, it would be done so with the written and recorded understanding that the acreage would still count for the remainder for things like open space, for meeting open space requirements, for things like impervious surface coverage, building coverage, and the like. So we wouldn't want to deprive someone who wants to donate land to the township of the ability in the future to turn around and say, well, had I kept those 5 acres, my percentages are here, here, and here. So we can do that by agreement, that land would still count against the remaining 25 acres in the future, if that's what everybody were in agreement would happen.
Because it would still be their property.
No, even if it became the township's property, we could by agreement say that that land would count against the 25-acre, what would then be the 25-acre Armstrong piece or the 25-acre hub for any future zoning calculations
And
or
the
or land
intent
use
would be,
calculations.
obviously, is that we want to keep this piece of property as open space regardless of who owns it, but because right now it's under the ownership of this developer, it would count towards their calculations.
If that's what
way,
everybody
it would
wanted to happen. Again, we don't want the donation of land to be a disincentive
Understood.
to the developer because he's saying, well, you know, I'm then going to limit what I might be able to do in the future by making my property
That's my
5
point.
acres smaller.
My point, if he makes the ground useless, except for public use, then it has no value to him for future development, then.
We can't develop it anyway, you're right, we're not going to develop
So
it.
all he's doing is volunteering to cut it for the rest of his life.
Correct.
Okay, so there's
Which
no
is,
benefit.
which is
to
what
him.
open space is.
Well, why is there such an objection to giving it to us? If it's not worth anything?
I don't think it's up to the engineer to decide that.
Well, I'm just trying to. Okay.
Sold.
Well, he has attorneys there too, he's got a whole handful of people.
I know, but you were asking John.
Thank you.
I mean, you're hearing what the
Okay,
members
I'm
of
just
council
wondering.
are saying and what we're looking at and what we're considering and thinking
I'm sure
about.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how well you could write something and then come back later and say, okay, well, it was open space, but now we are going to use it for this.
If
and
it's
now I
deed
use it for
restricted, we
this.
can't do that.
Right, if it's deed restricted, we can't be, but the point is, I understand.
Okay, all right.
Do you have anything else for John?
Last one. So I know we touched on this, and I don't think there's a need to really go over it. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on Tom's statement about spot zoning and how we feel that this is far from spot zoning. I didn't know if you guys wanted to have any discussion on that or not. That's my last open item for the zoning.
And then Russ, there was some other point in here about, there was a 500, correct me when you want to, but there was a 500-foot restriction or setback on a building that was a certain height, but there's no restrictions on
Yep,
setback
we're
for
gonna-
buildings that are
He said
lower.
it.
We're going to comply with that.
We're going to amend the
We're gonna-
ordinance, correct.
And
We're going to amend
scale
the
it
ordinance
and
to
have a
say you're going to
scale.
have to have an X setback before you can get to the X height.
Okay.
And we'll make it work for just this site, and of course, make it difficult for anyone else.
First, maybe what? I'm having trouble hearing.
I'm sorry, make it difficult for any other project that could fit in this zoning in the future with 30 acres.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So you're going to scale the buffering to the height of the buildings?
Correct. As requested.
Per the township engineer?
Correct. Yep. So that's why I didn't touch on all those open items. All those other ones that I did not touch on are will complies. So we're going to resolve them as the township engineer wishes. The other ones, I just wanted to make sure that we all had discussions and we're all on the same page. That's all I have. If anyone has any questions.
No other questions? You have another witness you wanted to bring forward?
Yes, we do.
Mr. Polari, before the next witness comes, in consideration of we haven't had court reporter lately, but she's been typing for 2 hours and maybe could
All right,
use
let's take
5 minutes.
let's take a short recess and we'll come back and move on from there. Give everybody a chance to go to the bathroom or get a drink or whatever.
Mr. Chair, just one question before you go. What time are you going till tonight?
Our curfew is 11 o'clock.
Okay.
It's 10:30, so.
I like quarter to 10. I like quarter to 10.
We're going to call the meeting back to order. Mr. Pizzo?
Yes, Mr. Polari, during the break, I had the opportunity to speak with council and applicants on items 11 and 12. It appears with the hour already being 10 after 11, we are likely not going to reach those two, I'm sorry, 10 after 10. Only feels like 10 after 12. We're likely not going to reach items 11 and 12. Both applicants have agreed to grant the township an extension of time to hold the hearings on those respective applications. I believe Mr. Murphy is here on behalf of the applicant for number 11, which is the proposed Marriott Hotel. Mr. Murphy, at this point, the township would propose tabling your item to a date of September 13 and would ask for an extension of time under the MPC through and until the end of October for the township to act on the plan. Thank you. So if council is of a mind, a vote would be appropriate at this time, Mr. Polari, to table item 13 to a date, item 11 to a date certain of September 13.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ed Tagmazian, second by Jesse Sloan. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you. We apologize, but these things sometimes happen. For the applicant on item 12, Mr. Odessa, is also here this evening. At least he was here. I spoke to him. I don't know if they're still out in the lobby. In any event, the same would be in place for that application. I'm not sure where the could someone see if American Fireworks is still out in the lobby? In looking at their application paperwork, which was included in our packet, it appears we do have a waiver under the MPC. So the appropriate action at this point, Mr. Polari, if council is of a mind, would be to table item 12, the minor subdivision for All American Fireworks, to a date certain of September 13.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion and second. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you. In speaking with counsel for the applicant currently before the board, Mr. Goldberg, we were looking at the timing for the application. Mr. Goldberg still has several witnesses to call. There are a number of members of the public, however, who have been here this evening, and I know the council wants to hear from them as well. So Mr. Goldberg and I discussed, if council is agreeable, that they would call their next witness, that we'd hear testimony from him up until around 10:30, at which point in time council would extend its curfew in order to hear comments from the public up to the curfew of 11 o'clock.
We okay with that? Okay, that's good with us.
And all of this is with an eye toward the fact that this hearing is not going to conclude this evening.
And do we have an extension on the,
And Mr., to that end, the rezoning and the zoning ordinance don't require an extension of time. However, the proposed land development would. I believe the extension of time that's currently on the record for that with the township is through to the end of August. At this juncture, we would ask for an extension of time, I guess, looking at the council's meeting schedule to the end of October.
Is it possible it can be extended to the end of September?
Well, certainly, whatever it is you choose to grant the township will be what it will be. Township's intention, I believe, is to move forward with the application with all deliberate speed. If, as a result of the comments I've heard thus far this evening, if there's going to be some change to the proposed zoning ordinance, and I don't know if there will or won't, but if there will, then we're talking at least a month anyway for all of that to be effectuated and to be re-advertised. I don't know what the council's meeting, the council obviously has 2 meetings scheduled in September and 2 in October.
We have one in September, Mr. Paizo.
I'm sorry, 1 in September, so if we don't hear it on the 13th, then we're on to the first meeting in October.
And that's fine.
Okay. So we have on the record an extension of time through to the end of October for the hearing on the the land development application for 2201 Street Road. With that, we can continue with your next witness, if that's
Yes.
okay, Mr. Polari?
Do we have to put that in form of a motion
Yeah, for the
to
the
extend
land
that
development.
time?
No, they've granted us the extension
Okay.
of time.
All right.
You can call your next witness.
Sure. Greg, if you could, introduce yourself to the board, please.
Good evening. My name's Greg Bianchi, and I am a commercial real estate professional. I have 32 years of experience in the commercial real estate industry, a wide array of projects represented throughout the region, retail, office, industrial, and mixed use.
Packet, I should say.
I'm happy to be here this evening. I want to thank council. I'd like to thank the township solicitor.
Actually, before you get started, we would offer Greg as an expert in commercial real estate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Township Solicitor, Township professionals and council, and the general public for giving me an opportunity this evening to provide you with some testimony. I have been active in the commercial real estate business for 32 years, as mentioned. Started my tenure 32 years ago with a project in Bensalem. I was a 21-year-old youngster out of school and arrived in Bensalem. At that time, the project was anchored with a drug emporium and a Frank's nursery right down by Street Road in Mechanicsville. I'm not sure how many of you remember those anchors, those category killers. And I was excited to be involved in that. And as time has progressed, I have progressed as well. And had an opportunity to be with a dynamic team, a real estate development firm identified as Metro Development, and a brokerage firm. With the brokerage firm, I am a vice president. I am licensed in Pennsylvania, I am licensed in New Jersey, and I'm also licensed as a broker appraiser. With the development arm, I am a vice president, and I provide in-house consulting and advising on all of our development deals. I'm very excited to be a part of this project. I'm excited to have an opportunity with this developer, 2201 Street Road LLC, to participate and to add my value and help advise on how to create a project and build excitement that will draw retailers that we would like to have. I could talk about my accomplishments, but one notable project that I like to reference is the Valley Square project in Warrington, Pennsylvania. Our firm was involved in that project in the late 90s with a master plan. Our firm executed that plan. Our firm developed that project. Our firm built that project. Our firm leased that project. We managed it. And I was involved in Valley Square for 17 years. Long time to be involved in such a great project. When we were involved with our Valley Square development, we'll use the term naysayers. Some people felt, well, you can't bring that caliber of a project to Warrington, or you can't bring that caliber of a project to that part of Bucks County. And the question was, why not? Why not? If it's happening successfully around the country at that time, and we use comparable projects to justify it, why can't it happen here? And I'm pleased to say that I was the first broker to get a Wegmans deal in Chester, Bucks, Montgomery, Delaware County signed and anchor our project for Valley Square. With the opportunity to have a Wegmans, we then were in a great position to take our development to another level and create a lifestyle Main Street and create some hybrid retail as well. If you compare square footage to this project, this is more of a boutique-ish mixed-use concept. Valley Square was a 150-acre project with 200,000 plus square feet of just lifestyle retail, not counting the traditional retail, and another 100,000 square feet of office space. In addition to Valley Square, and along with that mixed-use zoning, we recently developed a project called Valley Gate, which brought in multiple uses, and we spent a few years finishing that project, which is just south on 611. That project has retail, that project has residential, and that project has a hospitality component to it. So I'm here today to give you a little bit of testimony on why I feel this is a great opportunity for your town. I'm a very proactive individual. I'm a very energetic individual when it comes to these types of assignments, these types of projects. And we have a great, great opportunity here to bring you guys a great project. You have a developer here that's interested in developing in this town and investing in this town. And I think that speaks volumes with this type of asset class and why you want to give yourself an opportunity to present this to the retail world. We can go through some dynamic. I know I'm short on time, but I will begin to give you a little bit of an overview on the retail piece. I could spend some time and discuss mixed-use projects. Tom, the planner, really touched on a lot of those deal points. That's the second page, Mike. Page 2 down. The one thing I will say is this, and I can speak to this from experience. At my role and my capacity with our firm, I'm involved in tenant representation. I'm involved in landlord representation. I'm involved in sales. I'm involved in leasing. I'm involved in multiple asset classes throughout Philadelphia and the suburbs. So why I say that, and I can give you a good real-life example, the retail world or retailers are very interested in this mixed-use project. They're interested in the trends that it presents. They're interested in the population that resides there. They're interested in the daytime traffic counts that it generates. They're interested in the opportunity to have people that live, shop, work, and play at the location. And Valley Square, again, is a testament to that. If you guys know a little bit about Valley Square, they have a great event space that this project represents. That event space brings community members together. It gives community members the opportunity to have a magician night during the week, have this high school band playing, Halloween events. I mean, you could look at the event calendar on Valley Square's website and get an idea that movie night, that those things really, really do generate a sense of community, and that's the purpose behind the mixed-use concept. Again, I would like to touch on the future of commercial real estate. Tom did a great job, but with the time that I have, I'd like to go on to the next piece, which is a retail merchandising plan, the retail mix. So I did provide you guys with a handout, and I'd just like to spend a minute to educate you a little bit that when you take these projects and you put them on paper, it's important that you understand the mentality of the, well, in this instance, we'll say the retailer, and what the retailer likes to see on this plan, as far as gathering space goes, as far as event space goes, as far as co-tenancy. Very important word, co-tenancy. Retailers want to know who else is coming. When we started Valley Square, and when I was able to secure Wegmans as an anchor at Valley Square, that was a great opportunity for other retailers to say, hey, we like Wegmans, we like what they bring to the table. We'd like to be a part of that project as well. So with our mix and the opportunity to create something special here and build excitement, we take our merchandising plan and we share that with the retail community. I could take a minute and go through each category. I'll be very specific if I can, and we will go from there. So on the first use, A, home goods, hard goods. If you look at where building A is oriented on the plan, that gives a hard goods retailer the opportunity to occupy that store with a parking field that's going to be shared amongst some of the restaurants, some of the event space, and some of the other buildings. On B, specialty retailer, which basically specialty retailers we know focuses on a specific product category. That's an ideal building to break up, to create smaller units, 4, 5, 6 specialty retail units, and subcategorize that and merchandise that plan as well. On C, food, restaurant, and entertainment, which is a big indicator that the restaurants and the grocery are the engines that pull this train to make this a successful endeavor. When you look at restaurant opportunities, you have fast casual and you have sit down. Fast casual concepts, I'll be happy to provide you with an example or more concepts where you come in, order, and you're likely out 20 to 25 minutes. A sit-down concept is more inclined to spend some time, quality time maybe with family, friends, business associates. Could very well be an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. On the building D, lifestyle, anchors, and fashion, that's something that would complement the event space, but also have the ability to offer that building some parking. On E, food, restaurant, entertainment, same concept as building C. Really going to put an intent to do our best to give the event space what it deserves, and that's to do some outdoor dining and give some outdoor experience, and have the people that are going to collaborate in those common areas the opportunity to enjoy those amenities. Important, F, grocery. We know you have a new grocery store coming to town, the new Amazon in the former Kmart box. The way grocery is categorized in our industry, it's mainstream. The typical mainstream grocer could be a giant food store, it could be a ShopRite, it could be a Aldi type store. Then we go into specialty. You know, a specialty market could be something in the line of maybe a Patel Brothers and what they offer. And then we go into gourmet. And when we go into a gourmet anchor, that opens up opportunities, maybe Trader Joe's, Sprouts, different Whole Foods, possibly. And, it's interesting. If you understand those retailers, and I've worked with all of them, I have firsthand relationships with those retailers, they are very amenable to looking at a market, looking at the population, looking at the daytime traffic, looking at the office counts, and not just discounting a market based on demographics. That's been my experience. But most importantly, in order to have a chance to secure a gourmet grocer, they're going to look at the product, and they're going to look at the architecture, and they're going to look at the amenities, the landscaping, the main street, the ability to provide a pleasant experience, a pleasant opportunity. The days of highway, asphalt, building, that's in the past. That ship sailed. Today, everybody wants green. Everybody wants a lot of money spent on materials. They want money spent on making this look like a first-class project. We could go on, G, fitness and health. I know you guys have some fitness operators in town now. Fitness is a very important lifestyle component to these projects. That's an important category for us to make sure that we work hard to secure for this development. H is a financial health services building up front, likely a bank. I'm sorry, a financial services building up front, likely a bank. Pretty big for a bank, maybe a credit union type, if not a bank, and maybe some additional ancillary retail. I, convenience, fuel, that concept is a good traffic indicator, good driver. Peak times, that can generate up to 200 visits an hour. On non-peak times, maybe as little as 150. The fact that that's oriented on that part of the plan gives an opportunity for people to either come in and get out pretty quick, or if they decide, stay and patronize the site. J, professional services. We know retail, and we'll say in a good example, medical, maybe a real estate office, maybe a insurance office, maybe a brokerage office, the likes of Fidelity. Those types of uses fall under that category. It's very common to see those uses in retail developments today. And of course, the pad out front, the dining, the fast casual concept, that's where that belongs. That'll, pretty much be a good driver for the center, and it'll kind of give you an idea of the identity of the project with how you decide you anchor that. I did want to also let you know, on part of your handout, I gave you a vacancy report from CBRE, which is the world's largest commercial real estate services firm. In that report, there's two indicators. There's an office report, and there is a retail report. The office report subcategorizes Bensalem within the Lower Bucks County submarket, and that's evidenced through multiple reports. The retail report specifies Bensalem in particular, and it has some pretty good information on the GLA of the market and the vacancy factor, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Well, the things you just talked about, to me, we've tried in the past to get Trader Joe's, they said no. We tried to get Costco, they said no. We tried to get Wegmans, they said no. So while I appreciate your background and what you do, we have to be realistic about what your people are looking for, and they look at demographics and money in the community, how much the community works for. So I think a lot of those things that you're talking about are a stretch. Like Whole Foods, if Amazon's right down the street, Whole Foods is Amazon, I can't see
That's
them
correct.
putting a second one in. We have ShopRite, Giant, all the major supermarkets. So, you know, can you get something to go there? Probably, but, you know, when I hear those things, I just say, you know, we already know because we tried to get these people here and they won't come here because of the demographics and what the medium income is for Bensalem Township.
I understand. I understand. Well, if I can respond, I've had experiences when the overall project and the way the overall project is represented to the retailer and what that comprises of is part of it. It's part of the overall demographics role. Now, I do understand household incomes. I understand overall demographics. I know your demographics well. You're 1, 3, and 5, or 18, 100, and 300. Give or take a few. I know your household incomes. They either rate about that 80,000 mark consistently between the 1, 3, and the 5. So your traffic counts on this road are about 36,000 cars a day, and I won't sell myself short if I were you. I would be more optimistic and try
I'm
to
not
give.
selling you short, but
No,
I'm
not
just
me.
saying
I'm
these
saying-
are things that we have tried and we've been turned down.
With this caliber of a project, I think I'm not saying you will have success, but I think you have a better opportunity to do some convincing.
That's, well, my question was gonna be, do you think that we'll have more success because of the overall, project being sold as a full package of the site instead of just trying to get somebody to come into, you know, an empty store in the mall or something like that? We're talking about a whole site plan. You think we'll have more success getting those caliber stores in here because of that?
So we will start with curb appeal. We will start at the egress. We will start with that, we'll call that boulevard entrance. The way that will be landscaped, it's represented and shown on some of these renderings as well. And when you have the rapport and you have relationships, in most instances, the way I do with a lot of these major retailers, you do have an opportunity to be heard. And you have an opportunity to have them properly evaluate a location like this and give you feedback. And that's been our experience. And I will say we are in discussions with some grocers now that are not in your market, that would likely be interested in possibly coming to your market. One, a mainstream, and another one, a gourmet. So I think that's something you should be excited about. Just the prospect of it happening.
Absolutely.
It's a good start.
Thank you.
It's a good start.
Does anyone else have any questions for this witness?
Are you going to be working on this project, recruiting?
I am acting
retailers?
as an advisory and a consultant role at this time. At some time down the road, it's expected that I will be involved in the brokerage capacity as well.
Okay. Because what I don't understand is, and I've been in Bensalem all my life, is there's 65,000 people in Bensalem, and a lot of people go down Street Road, and they may or may not go to Parks Casino or off 95, but if an average supermarket like Trader Joe's, for instance, you know, they don't need everybody in Bensalem to shop there. They just need a percentage of people to shop there. Is that correct or incorrect?
Well, the way a store works, it's generated on trips. You know, a grocery store, hypothetically, like a ShopRite, that has a low profit margin, will have the ability to generate more trips from a farther demographic radius. So, you know, in that instance, a store that does, we'll say $1.3 million or $1.4 million a week, they could generate 40,000 people a week to that store. So.
Right, but not a supermarket, say a restaurant, okay? To get a decent restaurant, only a certain amount of people have to eat there a week, not everybody in the township. my point.
Well, that's correct. And restaurants do depending on their menu and then their service, they do depend on daytime population, which I won't sell myself short. You guys have a pretty good GLA of office inventory within this trade market here. So, and there's different types of restaurants as well. As I said, there's fast casual and there's sit down, which are catering to two different customers or two different intensive customers. So.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, then we're going to end here, and we'll pick this back up at our next meeting. We're going to give the public the opportunity to come forward once we're done here. So we're going to give the time for you guys to speak. When you come up to speak, please give your name and address. If you're from outside of Bensalem, your name, address, and where you're from, and give us your comments, and we'll move through.
Can we start? Hi, my name's Natasha. I'm from 2047 Hansel Drive. I'm sure a lot of you know me at this point. So a lot of interesting information was given today. My life has been turned upside down due to that storm. I will never recover from that storm. So for you to sit here and tell me that your property had nothing to do with that breaks my heart, because I know what it looks like back there, and I'm pretty sure none of you have been back there, ever, actually. That being said, there are a couple of concerns that me and my neighbors have, mainly this mixed-use district that you guys want to build. I've lived in a mixed-use district, and I could not walk to the corner. I was getting shot at. So that's my experience with mixed use. It's not good. Your drainage system that you're putting in is one of our biggest concerns, mainly because it's going into the exact same old pipes that have been there since the 60s. You're telling me that it's a slow drainage system. That's wonderful for you, maybe, but not for me, because the water still has to go somewhere, and that means my backyard. My backyard also sits right behind Building B, or whatever that building was. On Wednesday's meeting, you told me that we had 80 feet between my fence line and that building, and now it's gone down somehow or another. I'm not sure. But that brings other concerns. One, you want to build trees. Who's going to maintain that? Right now, we're dealing with overgrowth from that property that we've been dealing with since the day we moved in, including getting poison ivy last year from it. And nobody could help me with that. The other problem is that there's electric lines all over the place. What's going to happen with those electric lines when you start planting those trees, which, by the way, take about 30 years to mature? And what is your guarantee that your sewage system is going to work? I mean, we have to account for another 100-year storm, because that is climate change. That's what's happening. That 100-year storm could be around the corner. So I need to make sure that the drainage system that you guys are putting in is going to be able to handle that water. What's to say that if you had maintained that property accordingly, including the retention pond, the drains that are back there that are overgrown and broken, would have at least picked up some water. I had 5 feet of water in my house. 5 feet of water. That's taller than I am. Doesn't take much, but still taller than I am. And by the way, you're not on an island when there are other houses around you. This is still a residential neighborhood. So I don't want a gas station there either, because I don't want a gas station in my backyard. I don't think that's safe. I don't think that's fair. We moved out of the city so that we can have peace and quiet, which now you guys are completely stripping away from us by building as much as you want to build, including a 24-hour gas station, which was my understanding was taken off of the table at some point. I don't understand how it's back on the plans. So, I don't know if anybody has any answers for the questions that I have asked. All right, that's all.
Hello, everyone. I'm Colleen Sloweski, Slaweski. I reside at 2032 Hansel Drive. So I do have a couple questions regarding the mixed use. And as you know, we were called to a meeting on Thursday at the Fishers. The developer and the engineer spokesman for the developer recently told us in a meeting that Bensalem Township actually requested them to use this property as a mixed-use district. So I just want to know if that's true and why.
We wouldn't ask them to do it, they come in with a plan.
Well, they assume that you asked them to do that.
I can't speak for what they assume.
Okay, so I just want to hear it from your own mouth. Also, the developers for Cal Engineering requested a demo permit on behalf of the developer for the township, from the township. Can you tell me what mitigation efforts were required on that demo permit? So any mitigation on water, storm control? Because I know when I had a pool installed, I had to put a fencing. And has any of our township engineers been out there? Because there's no sediment control, there's hills, there is tanks, there is, I mean, I have pictures of biohazard waste still left on the property. Yeah, so where is the township on watching what happened on that demo? Has our engineers been out there?
Russ, can you answer that question, please?
Yeah, Quentin has been out there doing inspection during the demo. I don't know if you want to respond to any of that. I mean,
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So we got wax stripper on pallets. We got holes in fences right to the wax stripper. We have tanks, propane tanks left on the property. So, you want to answer?
So, building department goes up, it's Quentin Neron. We went out, last time I was out was with the County Conservation District. We just looked for stabilization. Building department goes out for the actual demolition. So I'm not sure what their status is on that,
as far as the building.
for the building demo.
But the Conservation District was out there from a stabilization standpoint of view. They were satisfied as far as...
We were waiting for some growth, but we haven't been back yet. We have not been back from Carol's request.
All right.
So that's the other thing. So one other question before I get there, but was the stormwater management and maintenance written into the deed of the property for the new owners? And was it transferred for any future owners of that property?
Joe, can you answer that question, or?
I'm not familiar with what the deed does or doesn't say. I apologize. I believe a copy of the deed may be part of the application packet, and we can certainly take a look at that. Insofar as the existing piping and basins and the like on the property, to the best of my knowledge, there are no township easements for any of the stormwater management facilities on the property. So they were the responsibility of the school district. When the school district sold the property to the current owner, they became the responsibility of the current owner.
One other question, was the PennDOT study completed on the property? So any roads that are going in and the traffic study? And will the residents of Hansel Drive be included into how it impacts our street? As many of you know, you've been on our block multiple times in the last month and a half, and you've seen the cut-throughs and the people just traveling up and down that street when we're trying to empty our houses into dumpsters. So the traffic does impact us, and not in a positive way.
They have not received or, to my knowledge, applied for yet a PennDOT permit.
So the residents of Hansel Drive, and this is directed towards pretty much the owner of the property. The residents of Hansel Drive sent certified letters to 2201 LLC the last 3 weeks ago. If the new developer was serious about protecting his neighbors on Hansel Drive, he would have heard our cries from losing everything we worked and built for. He would have performed a good faith effort to clean the existing property along with clearing any basins, high grass, debris piles left on the property. However, his plan was to win us over by offering us snacks, and I, for one, and I know my neighbors, were tired of fighting this county and now the developer on water issues in this county. The last anyone needed on Hansel Drive was to attend yet another meeting away from our family while our homes were in disarray. We spent the last 6 weeks attending to phone calls, begging our county officials not to turn their backs on us, applying for disaster assistance, and throwing away everything we owned while trying to hold down full-time jobs to pay for the bills for a home we couldn't live in. So now, there is only one storm drain, and all of that water that is discharging from his property that he's putting in basins, it goes to one storm drain, and it goes through Hansel Drive, down through Wendy's, across Straight Road. It can't handle it. We can't handle, we take on the complex, the apartment complex, Snyder Middle School, Hansel Drive, Unionville Road, and now you're asking us to take on the hub at Bensalem. We're overwhelmed. Our elected officials need to back us when we say we're overwhelmed. You should reject any and all proposed land development and zoning until an independent or all stormwater management for analysis for downstream events happen. We are overwhelmed. We can't take any more water in our property. And you know I've been here since 2019 complaining about the stormwater on this property. We have AC Moore that floods us in the back, and now we're getting the flooding from 2201. We're just underwater. We can't take it. And our homes are in jeopardy. And unless somebody's gonna indemnify our homes, because you all think it's great, it's the only way we're ever gonna live there. Or we'll rezone all of our properties for mixed use. And we'll sell to developers, because that's the only way out. So, if you'd like to see the pictures of the basins that are completely overgrown and 5 inches of grass clippings on top that no water could ever get through.
You can give them to our engineer and he'll pass them around for us to see.
Sure. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ijaz Mullah, E-I-J-A-Z-M-U-L-L-A. Ijaz, E-I-J-A-Z, M-U-L-L-A. I'm here to speak about the recreational use that the hub has given my team, Woodward Cricket Club, as well as the Greater Philadelphia Cricket League. Currently, we have over 30 individuals that play for the Woodward Cricket Club, and that comprises of a lot of citizens in Bensalem, where I'm from as well, 2500 Knights Road. The owner of the property has given us access to use the fields, which we've used for a few years now, and that really helps the youth. Being one of the youngest teams right now, it gives us a place to play. Getting a permit for cricket is close to impossible around here. So being able to play the game, also use the fields for recreational football, volleyball, it's been great. I'm sorry to hear about some of the citizens and the floods that they received, but I just wanted to bring to light some of the good things that the hub has been able to give to us, and hopefully with the open space, they'll be able to provide us as well. That's pretty much all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Council. Joanne Kelly, 1919 Hansel. Once the hub comes, there is no more cricket. I hope he knows that. There's no more. No, you've got 5 acres of open space, not where he's currently at, and from what I saw tonight, it includes some wetlands. So that's number one. But I did want to speak about it was my impression that this was zoning. The zoning commission has refused to rule on this for some reason. They sent everybody home without a decision, from what I understand. There's a reason for that. What you heard today is, like, I want to say, you're opening a can of worms in Bensalem for doing this. You know, a hub would be beautiful, but you heard expert testimony tonight that you're getting a petite hub. The one in Washington's Crossing, 150 acres. You are down to 25 acres if you're talking about the recreation space being reserved. I am the property at Humeville and Hansel. I have 1 acre. 1 acre. Think about that. They're telling you they're going to have 40 units of people living there, and it's 1.3 units per acre. How can that be when there's only going to be 30 acres or less available for living space? How is it? They're building up. They're asking you to put up a 5-story office building. We don't have one 5-story office building in Bensalem right now. Every use that they're asking for is inconsistent with what is currently happening in Bensalem. If 34 acres is smaller than one of Parks Casino's parking lots. And look what you're going to be doing there. And I didn't see where they said they're going to have letter I for the gas station, but that's absurd. That's absurd. And there's nothing on that by your commercial realtor regarding the 5-story office building. I'm sure that Boston Market is a great place to go. The Franklin Mills one is closed. Gone. That's the major part of the hub. I'm glad to hear this council tell the developer that standard setbacks are not sufficient for this project. You can avoid this issue by refusing to do a mixed-use zoning. I asked you last time, please consider retaining your control over this project. If you give them mixed-use zoning, you lose control. They will do what they want, and they will have the right to do that because you gave it to them. And since then, I've heard from some of you on this council that said, no mixed use, we want to keep control, we're not going to do that. But 2 nights ago, your developer said, I have been working with council for years, and council has requested this mixed use zoning. They told us that more than once. I think the people that you represent have the right to know. Who is requiring Carroll to continue with the mixed use zoning? Who is it? And when was anybody in the neighborhood asked for any input on this? What you heard John from Carroll tell you was, we're going to make this compact as possible. They have to. They only have 25 acres to deal with. They're going up. They're going up. We don't have, this is totally inconsistent with anything that is in Bensalem now. You yourselves spent more than a half hour on a parking debacle that will be your destiny if you give them mixed-use zoning. It will not go away. Only if you give them mixed-use zoning, your right to change things dwindles. The property owner's right to control things goes up. And all you get to do is sit back and watch until they need a variance. We question them about variances. The developer says, once this goes through, we don't have to get any variances, then there are none planned. Right? It's exactly what they said. That means you're out. And if you're out, guess who else is out? Me, and all my neighbors. If you don't have a say, neither do we. Somebody brought up, you said, this isn't like a mall where nobody wants to go to the mall to shop. The mall is on more than 30 acres. You are not going to get anybody going to a hub with all of this stuff. They're going to say, it's too crowded, I can't breathe. I can't breathe in there. You know, I go to the fish place to eat, and I can smell something else. It's not necessary. It's just not necessary. It would be better off. I mean, the mall's parking lot is larger than your hub, your planned hub. Who in the world needs a hub on Street Road? I know they bypass the traffic issues, but I'll tell you, if you allow this to happen, the first thing you have to do is protect the Hansel Drive residents, and you got to stop two-way traffic on that street. You got to make one end a dead end. Because if you don't, right now, we're getting through traffic to get out on Street Road. They're not planning a road until you give them the zoning. Then the road's going to come through, and it's going in my backyard. That's where it's going. People here have made the argument before, oh, but look at Target, look at that. They built Target right next to my house. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. I dare you to stand at your house and throw a ball and hit Target. But guess how many of those buildings I'm going to be able to hit from my kitchen window with a ball? Almost every single one of them. I don't think you understand how small an area we are talking about and the density with which they want to build. It's so different than anything else in Bensalem. And you know, I've said all along that this is spot zoning. It is unique zoning. It's never been done in Bensalem before. But once you do it, you're going to have a really hard time turning down anybody else's application all along the Street Road corridor. Once you go through with this, the can of worms is sprung. And my other issue about the spot zoning is the purpose of doing this. And this man, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, he'll tell you that the purpose of doing this is to preserve the overall character of a community while providing something that is missing. Nothing in your hub is missing. We have plenty of residential places in Bensalem. We have plenty of office space that is not being used currently in Bensalem. We have a ton of restaurants in Bensalem. The point of the overlay mixed use is to provide something that we need, because you are going inconsistent with the current plan. There is nothing planned that we need in Bensalem. That's number one. And if your plan to do this inures to the benefit of one person, which is what's happening here, the guy who owns the property is the only one who stands to win. All right, I may get to shop there. I can go anywhere to shop. I'm not a winner with the hub. I'm not a winner. I'm a loser, because my property rates go down. But if it inures to the benefit of one person, this is spot zoning, and this man will tell you that too. He said he testified, and he proved what spot zoning was. He was on the other side of the issue. We should get his transcripts. And you compare what he is trying to do here in Bensalem with what he just testified to. Now, I didn't read it. I have no idea, but he said he was on the other side of the issue. So get his transcript. It's available. I'm sure he'll give you the court term and number if it was actually done in open court. But you need to consider, so my point about that is, this isn't going to pass muster if it goes to Doylestown. It just won't, right? I mean, he'll tell you, it won't. Because really, this is spot zoning. It is unique. It will inure to the benefit of one man. The rest of us are screwed. And the density is insanity. I have 1 acre behind them. They're going to build all of what you heard on 25 acres. My shed looks crowded on my 1 acre. It's insanity. And do I have to remind you that the hub is surrounded by middle schools? Who is even thinking of the children going back and forth to school? And you know what? 40 residents doesn't mean there's a lifestyle difference and somebody's going to be able to walk to work. I mean, that is so ridiculous. I mean, am I the only one that thinks that's ridiculous? You're going to have 40 condos and everybody's going to be living in this wonderful hub on 30 acres and they're going to be able to walk to work? Come on. You guys are getting snowed. I know that Jay is going to develop this property. He owns it and he has a right to develop it. I know he does. And whatever he does, eventually, whatever you decide on Jay, it'll be a success. I'm sure of that. But you are opening a can of worms if you go with this mixed use. Big can of worms. Unfortunately, Jay's issues with the drainage, they're never going to go away from him, for him. They're just not. But you guys are going to have issues forever if you allow this to go through. It's unnecessary is my point. Just do it normally. Let him give you his plans. You don't need to change the zoning. It's totally unnecessary. Don't put yourself out of the loop. There's no reason for it. We're talking about 30 acres. We're talking about half of the size of one parking lot at Parks Casino. Please. It's just way too dense, doesn't make any sense. And I really, really hope that you don't open this can of worms. Thanks.
Okay, hello. My name is Jennifer LaPente, and I am one of the newest owners on Hansel Drive. I live at 2073. This is my first house that I actually bought. I am almost 38 years old, better late than never. And what was supposed to be something that is supposed to be so joyous and exciting has now become nothing but a crap show. It's a mess. What's going on in the back of my yard, and I don't have the thing up anymore, but if you look at this exhibit that's over there, the letter L, that was on the map, really should say the letter I, and that stands for the gas station, and that is my backyard. It's not something that I want in my backyard, and I feel like all I heard up here today was a whole bunch of people testifying and giving a whole lot of the pros as to what this is going to do for Bensalem. So I'm not that great at this, but I put up a list of a whole bunch of cons, and I just want to quickly go over those as to why I don't want this in my backyard. The first reason being the gas station. I don't want that, and there's lots of different reasons. 24/7 noise, cars running, loud stereo systems, gas smells, trash on the ground, which there's already plenty of that against my back gate. Fuel delivery trucks, which is also going to equal to loud noise and vibrations from my house. My bedroom window is against the backyard. Luckily, my son's is not, but I can only imagine what this is going to do for our rest and for him for his schooling. Is that going to keep him up all hours of the night, and he's going to go into school completely restless. The fumes, the vapors, and not just that, but also safety. The fact that there is going to be a road right next to this gas station. Who's to say that somebody doesn't just plow through, these beautiful trees and this fence they're putting up, and now this car's in my backyard. It's just quite scary if you ask me. Another thing that I feel is a con is ground level ozone pollution. This is in regard to the gas station. If you just bear with me, I'll try to read fast, but not too fast for her. You're welcome. There's a great article here, and it looks like it was from the National Institute of Health, perhaps, that it just says here, gas stations can still pose significant hazards to neighbors, even if following the safety guidelines that they're supposed to, especially children. Some of the perils include ground level ozone caused in part by gasoline fumes, groundwater hazard from petroleum products leaking into the ground, and exposure hazard from other chemicals that might be used at the station if it's also a repair shop. Hopefully this won't turn into that. Most gas pumps today must have government-regulated vapor recovery boots on their nozzles, which limit the release of gas vapors while you're refueling your car. But if these boots aren't working properly, the nearly odorless hydrocarbon fumes, which contain harmful chemicals like benzene, can be released into the air. Higher ozone levels can lead to respiratory problems and asthma, while benzene is also a cancer-causing chemical. So this is going to be in my backyard, possibly with my family. Underground gasoline storage tanks can also be a problem. Many a lawsuit has been filed against oil firms in communities across the country by people whose soil and groundwater were fouled by a gas station's leaking underground storage tank. Also, pipes leading to the tanks can be accidentally ruptured. When thousands of gallons of gasoline enter the soil, chemicals travel to the groundwater, which the EPA says is a source of drinking water for nearly half of the U.S. So I can only imagine what that will taste like. If buying a home, consider its potential loss of value if a nearby underground storage tank were to leak. So we just bought a house. We're excited, we're gonna fix it up. The value of it we thought was gonna go up immediately, and now it seems that this could be a possibility that I'm actually gonna miss out on, benefiting from this. What else here? We obviously have talked about this thing called, I'm learning all the terms, the buffer. So one of my cons was that this was extremely way too close to my house. When we met with this man on Wednesday with our snacks that he tried to win us over with, we were being told that this property is going to be smack up against us. And then tonight I'm hearing otherwise, but I'm still not hearing enough. The 15 feet it's quite a joke. What's going to happen with the space in between? Are they going to maintain all of that? Or it's already looks awful. There's trash all over our backyard to the point where we had to actually get a privacy green thing to put up just so we don't have to look at it. So they don't maintain their property now as it is. Let's just not talk about no privacy. They want to put up a 5-story building. I don't care how big of a fence they give me, because that's what they were trying to tell us. So we'll give you an 8 or 10-foot fence. That doesn't matter. When I'm sitting in my backyard trying to relax, I got to wonder, at night what the cleaning person for Boston Market headquarters is doing. Are they looking at all of my property and seeing all the value that I have back there? And wondering, hey, let's go hit that up at night. Nobody's over there. They go to bed around this time. Yeah, it's easy access. I don't like any of this. And as the previous woman said, there's no office buildings like that around here. What am I living in, Center City? I moved to Bensalem. I didn't move to Center City. If I wanted that atmosphere, I would be in Philadelphia. The condos that are going for sale above the retail spots completely concerns me. I believe just recently we got told and we've been made aware of that in Bristol Borough, the condos or whatever those were, townhomes, were having a hard time selling that were on the waterfront. And now they went into Section 8 housing because they got desperate for them to sell. So I'm not opposed to Section 8 as far as, anybody that wants to live, I'm not opposed. If you have to be on low income, that's not the issue here. The issue I have is they're making it seem like it's going to be these lavish condos and everything's beautiful, but what happens if nobody wants to move into them over time? Then what? We're stuck with something that could possibly then immediately put down the value even more than just a gas station. And if the gas station's not such a big deal, I do agree that they can put the gas station in the middle of where the condos are going to be, and let's see how many people really want to move in there. That will make a quick fact that nobody's going to want those places. Just other things, I'll try to wrap this up. I'm sorry, guys, because I know it's getting late. Traffic, obviously, Street Road is awful to turn out to already with the one side that we go out. So I can only imagine what this is going to pose. What if there's not enough parking? What if, Joe and Sally want to meet at the bar with their friends, but there's no more parking there? And now what? Is my street going to be parked on, just for these people to go hang out with their friends because it's that easy of access to get to? Litter, way more litter than what I'm already seeing in my backyard. We already went over the devaluing of my house. There's no absolute way that I'm going to get top dollar for this house when I resell it in the future with all the stuff being in the backyard. The roads being way too close to the houses, once again, just talking about that, it's just going to contribute to more noise factors and safety. And then just some of the stuff that was talked about tonight that kind of concerned me. This one gentleman that was standing up here talking about how great the gas station is. Oh my goodness, it brings 200 visits per hour. I'm never going to get rest. How the heck is that a good idea? If you think that's such a great idea, then once again, put that in the center of where you're going to put all your condos, and let's see how fast you sell those. I doubt you will. We have other stuff on here, like I thought it was kind of, ridiculous that in the beginning of the presentation, nothing was mentioned about the gas station. Not until that last gentleman spoke did we mention the gas station, because they made it seem like this wonderful setup, and it's absolutely not. I read some things on the presentation about how they're looking to have a play in a neighborhood sitting. That's what it said. I just want to say that I don't know how that's going to be safe. This is a complete chaos. It's just listening to the last woman that spoke. There's nothing that's safe about that. Your house is on top of a retail building. So what are you going to say? Yeah, Susie, go ahead down. Make sure you don't get by those cars today. This is just unrealistic. Like the stuff I was reading, it's just insane. The probability of the whole drainage system, and the guy saying, I think John saying that the probability of that happening is slim to none, and this, that, and another. Well, it happened. And it's also probably slim to none that we have a tornado hit down, but hey, we had one hit down. I live in Pennsylvania for a reason. I don't want tornadoes. And a tornado hit down not long ago. That's crazy to me. So I don't really know, especially with the 2 spaces that we were talking about earlier. I know you guys kind of debunked that a little bit, but 2 spaces per unit also concerns me. Once again, going back to, traffic problems. If there's only 2 spaces per person, what's going to happen when we have these family gatherings for the holidays? Oh, we'll park on Hansel. Okay. So I just wanted to go over a lot of the cons, everything that's been going through my head since we've met with, I believe his name, Mr. Stoll, Michael Stoll, on Wednesday. So these are the things that I'm just asking for you to please consider before you put through such a horrible design that the hub is trying to offer. So thank you for your time, and I'm sorry if I took up too much of it.
Thank you.
Paul Ratloff, 1936 Hansel Drive. Paul Ratloff, R-O-T-T-L-O-F-F. 1936 Hansel Drive. All right, so with or without the hub, we're betting everything this one pipe's supposed to do its job. And I know everything off-site is not Jay's problem. The downstream from the pipe or across the street road, has anybody looked at the capacity of it? Could it be improved? Or that's my one big question is, can we make it better? Because it didn't work. And the other thing for comparison, the flood we had recently, how does that compare to 1980? And there was one in the 70s too. I asked their hydro guy if they can compare it, and I didn't hear back from him. So, I mean, is it a true 100-year storm, or did it happen in the 80s and did it happen in the 70s? I don't remember.
It did happen in the 80s too, but our engineers are doing a study on the whole area with stormwater and that, which we should have shortly, so we can look at that and look at some of the problems that are there.
Same pipe, and everybody's betting on this one pipe to do everything. And let's just hypothetically, if it is not capable of it, I don't know what the point is of building all this other additional stuff. I know the time release will make it a little better, but it's only a portion of the property. They said 178 acres are draining into this area.
We're going to have that report before we have the continuation of this meeting the next time, and everybody that's here will have the opportunity to speak again. So
Okay.
we'll see the rest of it. But the mayor and his staff have taken this seriously, and us on council, and they are doing it.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to close. Joe, do we have to do vote to continue this to the next meeting?
Yes, we'll have to do a motion. There's one thing, Mr. Polari, I just want to make sure the record reflects, and some of the members of the audience who spoke may recall, in April of 2019, the 5 members of council were asked to consider at that time an application from this developer for a mixed-use, the creation of a mixed-use zone and the rezoning of this property to that mixed-use zone in April of 2019. That application was denied 5-0. So to the extent that anyone out there is thinking that the township is directing that this property be developed mixed use, you can look back, turn the calendar back 2 years. Again, some of you were in the room that night. Council denied that application 5-0. The applicant is free to I didn't want to start a debate. I just want to remind everyone.
I knew that, but I'm trying to say the lies that are coming through that are just saying they're pushing it off on you guys, and we know it's not. Yeah.
And so, beyond that, the appropriate action at this point, I guess, if I could have just a moment to confer with Mr. Goldberg as to when we think the application would be ready to come back.
Here, look at these. You wanna do something?
At this point, if council is agreeable, the applicant would ask that we table the continuation of all three items, 8, 9, and, 8, 9, and 10, to a date certain of September 13. Between now and then, if it's determined that we're not ready to continue on September 13, then we can notify the public that this will be pushed into the month of October.
That's up to the board to do that, but we put other things on the back burner that, we can't keep pushing them up. So, I mean, we have to take a look at that and see what we can do to accommodate the other people that we moved to the 13th at this point, too.
Then, Joe, is the developer automatically giving us an extension beyond the 13th if we need it?
He already has.
Okay.
Already have. I mean, if the board is agreeable to that, I'll take a motion in a second, but I just don't see how everything that's we talked about tonight. What's the board's?
I mean, I'll make a motion that we table it to September 13th, but I have the same concerns as you, Mr. Polari, that we put a lot of stuff already, we stacked a lot of stuff onto the 13th, and I don't know what we're gonna have time for and what we're not gonna have time for.
We can always table it at that point.
You can put the option up, and
Yeah,
it's up to you guys if you want to give them the okay to the extension.
We have to put the people ahead that we moved to the 13th.
When's the
already.
extension of time good till, go?
End of October, I believe.
Go ahead.
At this point, we have until the end of October to act on the land development plan. So, again, I think the developer will certainly, has heard everything this evening that we've heard, both from the council, from the public. Similarly, we've heard from the applicant, its position on things. Mr. Benner and Mr. Katsouris certainly exchanged a number of items that there's still some information that the engineers are looking for. So I think if everyone will act reasonably, if things are in a position to be brought back on the 13th, then the lion's share of this hearing is already out of the way. Conversely, if after we're done, everybody has a chance to distill and reflect upon what was heard tonight, if there are going to be some changes to the zoning ordinance that the applicant may turn around and say, okay, we heard council say this, we heard council say that, and we're going to make some changes to the SRMU, then we wouldn't be able to act on it on the 13th in any event. That would require some additional review and additional advertising. So that would take care of itself. But right now, I don't think it's unreasonable. And again, we'll make a point to put on the township social media and web page if we know ahead of time that they're not coming in on the 13th. We can make sure that the public is given advance notice that they can save their Monday evening.
Okay, a motion would be in order.
I'll second Councilman Sloan's motion.
Okay. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 5-0. We'll schedule you for the 13th.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience tonight.
Thank you.
We should ask for public comment on non-agenda
Yes.
items.
If there's any public comment on any other agenda items, or you have any other public comment on anything, please, you're free to come up and give us your comment.
Hello, gentlemen. Alan Windsor, 3232 Azalea Avenue. We've been talking about this flood that happened over there today. Well, I got hit with the tornado, and I got like $28,000 worth of damage to my house and property. But all behind Faulkner, and there's 2 creeks that run through there. And some very big trees came down and are blocking the 2 little creeks that are in there, or rills, or whatever you want to call them. Is there anything the township can do to have this mitigated?
Is it on Faulkner's property, or is it on the trailer park's property, or whose property is it on?
It's in the creeks, so I don't know, there's something to do with rivers and creeks that is a federal?
The tree guy went through they're generally considered waters of the Commonwealth.
Quentin, can we go out and take a look at that and see what we can do? Would you do that?
I
Quentin's
mean,
gonna
there's
go-
100-year-old trees and
I understand. We went over we were over that way. We couldn't get down to you because everything was shut off, but, yeah, no, we took a tour
I
over
was
there, and
there.
it was bad. We just couldn't get
They
through it.
wouldn't let
looking
anybody,
highway.
any of us.
Quentin's gonna go take a look at it and see what we can do, or see if we can get what we have to, the next step is to get that taken care of for you.
Okay, my second question is the township has a tree bank. Can some of the trees from this tree bank be put into the buffer between the trailer park and the,
I believe.
because the buffer is gone?
If it's private property, I don't believe that the township can use the tree bank trees for private property, but we can look into that and see what possibilities there are too.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll talk to the mayor about it, and we'll look into it and see what can be done.
It's a mess.
I understand.
Thank you.
Joe, we had 2 other items that were down the bottom. Are we just going to move those to the next meeting too?
Did we just leave this stuff in a box?
You guys are good. You guys are good.
You have permission to go in my box.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Very much.
I imagine that item 13 can wait until your next meeting. Item 14 is a permit fee reduction for the Christian Life Center for an event that they're holding on September 11th. If council doesn't mind investing
Yeah,
perhaps 1 minute
we can
into
do
that.
that. Yeah, let's take that.
Yeah, Mr. Player, I'll make the motion that we approve number 14, the reduction of permits for Christian Life Prison and Recovery Ministries, 3100 Galloway Road.
Second the motion.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, the ayes have it, 5-0.
And then since item 13 was advertised, just a motion to table it to a date certain of September 13 should be fine.
So moved.
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 5-0. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.